I am Dr. Chandrasekhar Boble. Welcomes you all in this national level panel discussion on NEP, that is National Education Policy 2020, a paradigm shift in Indian education system, a pharmacy perspective. On behalf of Indian Pharmaceutical Association Pune branch, we extend our warm welcome greetings to our expert panelist, Dr. Devidas Golar, who is a member of National Education Task Force, Government of Maharashtra, Principal Marathwada Mitramandal College of Commerce, Pune. And second expert panelist is our very own Dr. Atmaram Pawar, convener of Indian Pharmaceutical Association Pune branch and principal of Bharati Vidyapith's Pune College of Pharmacy. We also extend our warm greetings and welcome to all the distinguished academic leaders and faculty from all over the India. With this short introduction and welcome, now I will request the President, Indian Pharmaceutical Association Pune branch, Dr. Manohar Patil sir, to extend the welcome address and introductory remark. Over to you, Patil sir.
Thank you, Chandrasekhar. Good evening, one and all. On behalf of Indian Pharmaceutical Association Pune branch, I, Dr. M.J. Patil, very much pleased to welcome you all distinguished academic leaders and my fellow teachers, the eminent speakers and the panelists of today's webinar, Dr. Devidas Golar sir, who is a member, National Education Policy Task Force, Government of Maharashtra, and the principal of Marathwada Mitramandal College of Pharmacy, Pune. Dr. Atmaram Pawar, a well-known community pharmacist, author of many books, pharmacist trainer, and the principal of Bharati Vidyapith's Pune College of Pharmacy. And the moderator, Dr. Chandrasekhar Boble, World Peace University, MIT Pune, for this webinar on the National Education Policy 2020, a paradigm shift in Indian education system, pharmacy perspective. In this webinar, first, Dr. Golar sir will talk on NEP 2020 about 35 to 40 minutes, in which he may cover the vision, goal, objectives, and the key highlights of the National Education Policy 2020 in the perspective of higher education institutes. Then for 15 to 20 minutes, Dr. Pawar sir will relate this policy in context of pharma education, and this will give us a clear vision where and how our colleges or the institute will stand in future. And then the important panel discussion or the question answer sessions will take up through the moderator. So you all are requested to put your relevant questions either in the chat box or moderator will unmute you and then you can ask personally. As we all know, National Education Policy 2020 is big revolution replacing the 34-year-old policy idea and envisioning to bring about the much needed modifications in the Indian education system. The policy has maintained a delicate balance between the traditions and the interdisciplinary approach, which is the need of 21st century. National education policy has the potential to revamp the skills of the youth of our country and has all the right tools that are needed to be competitive at all the global level. Needless to say, the new education policy is undoubtedly a progressive and ambitious policy that India is waiting for. Before I request Dr. Golar sir to initiate his talk, let me introduce him. Dr. Devidas Golar sir is an economics graduate from the Mumbai University and the Masters of Management Studies from K.J. Somaiya Institute of Management, Mumbai. Further, he has completed his doctorate degree in the area of Industry Institute Partnership. During his 20 years of academic career, he has served at Mumbai University's Department of Management, Singhad Institute of Management, and Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Additionally, he is also a visiting scholar at Tübingen University, Germany. Dr. Gollar sir is actively involved in teaching, training, industry, consultancy, and has undertaken several MDPs for banks, Maharashtra Police, various corporate houses, and Ministry of HRD, Government of India. Dr. Gollar sir is currently serving as a principal at Marathwada Mitra Mandal's College of Commerce and is also recognized PhD guide at Savitribai Phule Pune University. His areas of interest include corporate social responsibility and social entrepreneurship. As an acknowledgement towards Dr. Gollar sir's experience and credentials, the Ministry of Higher and Technical Education, Government of Maharashtra, has appointed Dr. Gollar sir as a member of the task force to study the implementation of the National Education Policy 2020. With this, I request Dr. Gollar sir to initiate his talk on the National Education Policy. Thank you. Dr. Gollar sir, over to you.
So good evening, everyone. All the dignitaries of Indian Pharmaceutical Nation, Pune chapter, my colleague, Dr. Patil, my co-panelist.
Sir, I think you are sharing rights because you are a co-host. Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have the sharing rights.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So my co-panelist, Dr. Pawar, a very warm good evening to everyone. It's just 40 minutes time, and it's actually a challenge in covering everything in 40 minutes. But I'll just try and do as much as I can to give you a glimpse of what the policy suggests. Without wasting much of our time, I would switch on to my PPT. Okay, is the PPT visible, sir? Hello?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It is sharing. Under sharing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's okay.
It's visible, right?
Yes, sir. It's visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, so again, what I'll do is in just 40 minutes time, I'll broadly first try and explain the rationale for why this policy has come into picture in 2021. Second, I would just give you a very little glimpse of how situations evolved in terms of education, particularly higher education. Third, I'll broadly speak about the structure, the new proposed structure that is being put forth by the National Education Policy. Followed with that, I'll go with highlighting some of the major reforms that are going to concern each and every one of us in the discipline of higher education, be it even pharma industry, or be it even science, or be it even social sciences. With the major reforms, I'll come to the most important aspect, that is how things are going to mobilize in terms of the resources, maybe from government or maybe from some independent agencies, as in the form of grants and funding. And so as to be eligible for those grants and funding, what would be the criteria the new structure would look for from the institutions? So that I'll speak about. And in conclusion, I'll just sum it up everything that has been spoken about. So yes, to begin with, if I had to, I mean, not that I'm going to get into every details of it, how the policies evolve, but yes, there should be a special mention to Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, who happened to be the first vice president of our country and who actually taught at many universities in India, including University of Calcutta and also abroad, that is University of Oxford as well. And he was the first chairman of this University Education Commission. Under his leadership, the first commission was established in 1948, immediately after independence, and so as to look at the ecosystem, what we have at that point in time for the national education, I mean, the education, higher education at that point in time, as well as the school education. Followed that, we actually prominently remember Kothari Commission, because they brought in a lot of changes in terms of, because most of our, I mean, even though today also we have got influence with the Western education, over then as well, Higher education was given a lot of priority during Dr. D.S. Kothari's commission, and that's why Kothari commission stayed for a longer time, and it went on with several amendments. One of the major amendment Kothari commission has suggested, which came into effect in 1976, that is, education as a subject should be brought into the concurrent list. It shouldn't be just the subject of the center, it should be also the state and center both. And under that pretext, whatever the center suggests now, to a larger extent, it is binding on every state. But yes, even the state has some rooms or some mechanisms where they can customize few things here and there. And perhaps with that particular consent, when the policy was established in the cabinet, the states were told to look at their own ecosystem, and in that context, the government of Maharashtra actually enacted this task force, which is headed by Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar, which I'm a member to, and we were looking at the possible situation that exists now for higher education. And given the kind of guidelines the new national education policy suggested, what changes or what preparedness we need to bring in so as to implement it in the state of Maharashtra. So this is how the 1976 concurrent list on education has made the changes which are happening even today. Followed with that, particularly I'll come to 1991, when we all know that 1991 was a era under the Dr. Manmohan Singh as a finance minister, Dr. P.V. Narasimha Rao as a prime minister. They went across massively what we call as LPG liberalization, privatization, globalization policies. And to respond to that particular policies as to or to more support those kind of growth of those policies, the education policies underwent again a kind of a change. That was a program of action which was called in 1992. And we continued on that particular policy for a very long time with little changes here and there in school as well as higher education. Cutting it very short, in 2016, Subramanian Committee was constituted because there was a lot of changes that happened over a period of time in higher education even from 1991 onwards. And this particular Subramanian Committee was responsible to identify that what are the constraints or what are the problem areas at this point in time in higher education which needs to be addressed on priority basis. And followed with that particular address, a custodian engine committee was constituted. So what I'll do is I'll just briefly put up on some of the major findings of Subramanian committee to the learned people over here. 2-3 findings. There are many findings that they have come across with. 2-3 major findings perhaps you all are aware about. One, Subramanian committee came with this particular finding with the existing education system that they say that there are too many things we learn, our children learn or students learn, which are not necessarily useful in life over a period of time. So today we can very well establish with this particular fact that what we learn in our schools or perhaps in our colleges, we learn so many things, but to what extent actually we are in a position to actually leverage from that learning, that is something a big question. So that was one. Second finding they came across which is a very obvious finding, that our entire education, higher education is very exam centric. And that is perhaps the reason it is affecting learning. So we all know for sure that today what has happened is even in social sciences as well as sciences, that if a student takes up a kind of a rote learning, even for 1 month before the exams, he would end up scoring a kind of a good marks. But does that mean that the student has learned? I mean, that was a big question. And it is more like that a luck factor as well. If they have like if I solve some 3 or 4 question papers, and if the questions happen to be from this particular 2-3 question papers, I may score good. If they don't happen from that, I may not score well. So it was all more on luck. There what we popularly call as a Russian roulette. So that was again one of the biggest lacuna, which was actually hindering the learning. Exam was more exam. It is still more exam centric. Other aspect which they have come across, which I'll talk to it later to you, that there's a lot of commercialization as well as corruption in a way has seeped into higher education and even into school education. How do we address that as well? So as for the inclusiveness. So this were some of the major findings which Subramanian committee came across with. And in addition to that, one of the most contributory findings they found that we actually dwell only in a single discipline, education orientation. We still shy away from being interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. And that is somewhere a reason why we are unable to create a thinking mind, or we are unable to create the kind of innovations that are required into our society. Because history is witness to the fact that whatever innovations, be it a small social innovations or science innovations or discovery that has happened, we all know for sure that those have happened because they were a conducive environment at that point in time for those people to think interdisciplinary. So somebody, pharmaceutical, a pharma graduate, having some exposure to, let's say, psychology or sports, right? Can this be a two diverse discipline come together? And if you think in those lines, there's a possibility that something new would evolve, which would benefit the society. So the approach of interdisciplinary is somewhere missing in our education. Rather, we are operating in silos. I mean, to the fact that you have pharmaceutical council, there is a medical council, then there is a bar council, then so we have actually put ourselves into several verticals. And somewhere those verticals have now appearing as a constraint for us to move parallel. So that is again one of the major constraints Subramaniam Committee came across with. And after having established those constraints, a Kasturanjan committee was constituted to address those constraints and come across with some guidelines in the form of a policy. And we all know that this particular policy underwent a kind of a serious or even several consultation, right from a very interior, geographically interior areas to metros, even at various kinds of self-help groups, even at a very much a kind of a civil society organizations, and based on several dialogues, consultations with various, even I still remember in Pune University also, we had 2 consultation meetings where people were called, and there were deliberations that happened. And based on all those consultations, finally they submitted this particular document to the government, and on 29 July 2020, it was approved by the Union Cabinet of India, and officially national education policy was rolled into India. So this is where the status is. Now, where are we? I mean, if it is already approved by the cabinet, why is it that it has not come in the form of a kind of a regulation? Still, there is a time for it, and I'll quickly touch upon that in my later slide. Followed with this, I would just like to bring to you further few more rationales why it was very important for our country to actually revise or revamp our education. And there are several additional reasons to that, what the Kasturanjan Committee found out. One of the major reasons was during the recent meeting at the United Nations, not recently, almost in 2015, there was this one agenda that was passed through that the entire globe has to work in a sustainable development manner. And they identified some 14, broadly 14, I mean, there are a little more to that, 14 sustainable development goals. So uh, sustainable development goal 4, I mean, there are all those goals in various areas. SDG 4 specifically deals with education. And it very well pronounces that the education necessarily will have to be inclusive, equitable, and qualitative. So this particular aspiration or a big kind of promise that they have laid onto themselves, all the members of the United Nations, which India is a part of, it has to be achieved, and numerically or aptitude-wise, it has to be achieved in terms of Indian context. The higher education gross enrollment ratio has to reach 50% by 2035. At this point in time, the national average lingers around 25 to 30, depends on which state you are. 25, 26. To some extent, Maharashtra is little better than some of the states in the northern side. Kerala is better than Maharashtra. So it is almost like 34 to 35%. But still, 50% is a kind of a distance dream. I mean, somewhere for a state like Bihar and some of the northeastern states, it is into like 8 or 9% or just 12%. So bringing it to 50% is a kind of an objective measure which Government of India, through this particular policy, has given a target to ourselves that in case if we reach to 50% of the gross enrollment ratio, then and then only we'll be able to ensure that there's an inclusive and equitable quality education happening in India. So that is also one of the things which actually pushed the government to revise our education policy so as to achieve this particular target. Next, very important thing which we look at it, because as I said, most of our education, because of its exam-centric nature, it is trying to promote a kind of a rote learning without much of a kind of a actual application learning. So as to address that, there are several structural changes which we need to bring in, and structural changes in terms of its pedagogy or in terms of its curriculum has to necessarily be trying to promote experiential kind of learning, holistic, integrated. I'll come to those few of those aspects in the later stage of my discussion. Meaning to say that in an attempt to create what we do today is we are trying to emphasize a lot on skill development. We are trying to emphasize a lot on entrepreneurship. We're trying to emphasize a lot on incubation. Make our students more employable, make our students more enterprising. But in the entire attempt, are we somewhere discounting to make our students or make our young generation more, what we say, composed or more risk prone towards the kind of changes that are happening in the society today? For instance, if I have to just give a small example, that we have come across with several incidents that a certain student, maybe a school student or a college student, have committed suicide just because they don't have the access to mobile phones, or they were completely cut off from the education and they felt left out. Even for a small reasons, they are taking this extreme step of ending their life. So in an attempt to actually make our student more employable, are we somewhere trying to compromise on this particular character building, value building into our student? And that is also one of the very important aspects the policy tries to address. So we'll come to that as well. So this was a broader rationale, what the policy suggests or the policy is based on. I'll just give you a very small glimpse what the document is. The document broadly, if we look at, and you all must have seen the document, National Education Policy document, the policy is categorically divided into two parts. The first part deals with school education. We all know it has changed a lot. And the second part deals with higher education. So in particular, the higher education has almost 14 different sub-chapters addressing each one of the areas which you can see on the screen. I'm going to touch upon few of those which are very important, which are going to make a lot of difference to us as a teacher and as an education institute. First of all, I'll get into the structure, because most of us have been hearing from a very long time that UGC or AICT. Sir, my slides are visible? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir, you are audible,
Okay.
sir. Yes, sir, audible.
Okay. We are on slide of restructuring, right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, because in between, sometime in other presentation, my slides froze, and then I got to know little later. Fine. So first, we have heard a lot of times that AICT or UGC, they're going to be completely scrapped, and how that would happen. Just to give you a broader idea how that would happen and when that would happen, and in the sense in what process that would happen. First of all, now since the cabinet has approved the national education policy, now the next stage, the cabinet has to approve a independent commission called as Higher Education Commission of India, popularly known as HECI. So this particular commission is going to be an apex body which will function under Ministry of Education, which was earlier known as Ministry of HR. So the moment this commission gets approved by the cabinet, I guess from that moment itself, the UGC and AICT existence will cease to exist. I think if we would have not encountered the pandemic situation, perhaps by now, Higher Education Commission might have tabled in the cabinet, and that might have got approved, and we would have started the process of getting into a new structure as well. But nevertheless, I think at any point in time, given the kind of priority that we have when we are done with that, the cabinet would take this particular commission for approval. And the moment it approves, it is going to have 4 different verticals. So the Higher Education Commission will monitor 4 verticals. At this point in time, if you look our education regulatory bodies, they are bodies which are more or less a discipline constituted bodies. So like, for example, social science will more looked by UGC, technical and other education will be more looked by AICT. So this particular discipline-wise categorization is going to be completely taken up, and they're going to have a functional categories or functional verticals. I'll just spend 2 minutes on this because this is an important thing. So what are those 4 verticals that are going to operate in the proposed policy? The first vertical is about National Higher Education Regulatory Council. Now, irrespective of which discipline the college is, which area the college is, it is going to have only one regulatory body. And this regulatory body will give a complete guideline on to right from the establishment and the functioning of the college. So the regulatory body is going to be one, irrespective of the institution, one. Second vertical is going to be the National Accreditation Council. Now, again, we have a confusion over here. Should we go for NAC? Should we go for MBA? There are also some other kind of accreditation which are government approved or not approved. That's another thing. But what the policy suggests over here is that they're going to get rid of NPA as well as NAC, and there's going to be maybe a kind of a synchronization or maybe a kind of a merger of the existing accreditation bodies, and it will be there will be only one accreditation council which would have accreditation. I mean, there would be parameters, difference in parameters in terms of demography, in terms of some discipline as well. But the council would be only one council which would look at the entire accreditation of the body. Because today we have a huge confusion. If some people say that the NBA, National Board of Accreditation, with more with Washington Accord, and it is more, what do you say, transparent, and it actually measures what it ought to measure because it measures the program and not the institution, whereas NAC measures the institution, and there are several kind of confusions in terms of flips and flaws on that. So there will be only one council, accreditation council, which would govern or which would do a kind of accreditation of all the existing institutions, irrespective of what discipline they belong to. Third would be the grants council. There used to be a lot of debate. We all might be able to recall that in between there was a debate that should we rename UGC as University Regulatory Council because it just is not the grant council. Its job is not just to offer grants but to also regulate the entire thing. And that was very true in terms of the function that it was performing. But nevertheless, now at this point in time, there will be one vertical which would be exclusively looking only at the grants, nothing else. So what kind of grants, in what form they will be disseminated, will there be some kind of independent bodies which would operate under this particular grant council? So this is all being thought about, and there are some guidelines which are already existing with the policy right now. So that is one. That is the third one. And the last vertical will be the General Education Council, which would primarily look at your curriculum, your pedagogy, your evaluation patterns, and also your credit systems. So all the curriculum, pedagogy, evaluation related aspect are going to be completely taken care by the Education Council, General Education Council, irrespective of the disciplines. So this is what we say is, and this would be further, there would be an advisory board on education, central advisory board, which would be just an advisory board, which would be actually advising or consulting the National Higher Education Commission of India. So this is how the structure would look like once the cabinet approves the Higher Education Commission of India. So I think with the structure we are clear. Now, getting a little deeper into the structure, I'd just like to throw some light on how the situation would be with this new evolved structure. At this point in time, we operate as central universities, state universities, affiliated institutes, and private universities, deemed universities. So there are several kinds of structure that exist today. In the new system, there would be only 3 types of structures. Structures in the sense of the institutions, the forms of the institution. One would be unitary universities. Second would be cluster universities. And third would be multidisciplinary universities. Just 2 minutes on this. Like for example, let's take our own example, Pune as a university. At this point in time, Pune is a state university which operates on affiliation concepts. With the new policy, no more. It's not going to have any affiliation kind of concept. It will convert itself into a standalone unitary university, just like what we have central universities like University of Hyderabad or BHU or something like that. So they won't be giving any affiliation. They will just function as an independent unitary universities. Second, cluster universities. Cluster universities is a concept which is very evolving. At this point in time, we have one cluster university in Mumbai. The second, again, I'm told that it is also evolving. And you must have heard about Dr. Homi Baba Maharashtra Cluster University, which was enacted as a part of the policy which was recommended. And just hold on. Okay, so the cluster university that has evolved in Maharashtra is comprising of 5 colleges, which were all affiliated to Mumbai University. Those 5 colleges, if I'm not wrong, one is the Wilson College, then the Institute of Science, then Siddham College, then Law College, and the College of Education. Now, all of those colleges, if you look at it, they are situated in South Bombay, South Mumbai, and maybe at a kind of 5-kilometer radius. And the other aspect is all of them are owned by government. There's government institutions. Now, what government thought is that these are all kind of different disciplines. I mean, one is dealing with management and dealing with science, then law, then education. They brought all these 5 colleges together, and they went for autonomy, then they went for de-affiliation from Mumbai University, and then they established themselves as a cluster university. So in between, there was also the vice chancellor went for it, and subsequently the process happened. So this is a cluster university structure. Now, tomorrow, we are operating as an institution. Most of us are operating as an institution, a standalone institution, which are affiliated or standalone, which may be in an affiliation way also. So there's a possibility that if there is a trust which has like 3, 4, 5 colleges, maybe in a kind of a vicinity, first they will go for autonomy, then they will have to go for de-affiliation, and then they may establish themselves as a cluster university. But in case if they are not reaching to the level of cluster university, they would be termed as multidisciplinary institutes. So, 10 years from now, not 10, 15 years, because by 2035, the policy says that there shouldn't be any affiliated institutes. So that's the target. And it has already started from the central university as of now. And it will reach to the last of the last college in the most interior part of Maharashtra or any other country. So multidisciplinary institute is the first step, that is autonomy, de-affiliation, and then it is a multidisciplinary institute. Now, why it is called multidisciplinary institute? There's another reason to it. The policy somewhere recommends that any institution which has got only one discipline to teach, and there are less than 3,000 students, there is still a debate on 3,000 or 5,000, 3,000 students. Those institutions, single discipline, less than 3,000 students, this institute will cease to exist. Now, there are a lot of questions on it, and that's where our task force was working on. So the policy recommend that. So this particular institute with a single discipline nature, let's assume that if there is any college which is just into pharmacy, College of Pharmacy, and there is no other discipline in that particular college or in that particular campus. In that case, that institute or that college will have to start another discipline. Or if there's already a discipline in the vicinity, they'll have to tie up with that particular institution and evolve as one institute. And that's how the number also goes up. And the interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary kind of structures also evolve. And not just that they have to just tie up with that particular institution, but also they have to map the curriculum in a way that the students are free to take courses, irrespective of the program, free to take courses between this institution. That's multidisciplinary. And if there are the 3-4 multidisciplinary institute, they may come as a cluster university. So this is what the structure is going to look like. Now, within the universities, what they have done is they have identified like what kind of tag or what kind of impression one needs to carry from those universities that we are talking about, unitary or cluster. So the policy further suggests there has to be some kind of progressive discrimination in those institutes so as to perhaps promote research. So if any institution, let's say, for example, tomorrow Pune University gets into a unitary university, and there would be certain kind of parameters. And if that particular university is found to be very high on research in terms of their output, then that particular university will be termed as research intensive university. Or for that matter, any pharmacy college today, I mean, when they get into multidisciplinary institute over a period of time or over a period of as a cluster university, and if it is found that the research component is very extensive and there's a kind of huge output in terms of the research aspect, then that particular university or institute will be termed as a research intensive, because the grants and everything would be different for that particular institute. That doesn't mean there won't be any teaching in that university. There would be teaching, but the research component would be very high. Exactly little opposite to it, if a university is found very high on teaching and less on research, in that case, that will become the teaching. And the colleges which are just, I mean, de-affiliated themselves, but still to strengthen their, capacities, which are like become as at this point in time as an autonomous degree granting colleges. But if this autonomous degree granting colleges, if they evolve with the research component over a period of time, again, they may get status as research intensive or teaching intensive in future. So this is how the entire structure would look like. And there is an ambitious plan the government has put across in the policy that they're going to establish something called MERU, which stands for Multidisciplinary Education Research University. So every district, or at least based on the vicinity, at least 1 in 2 or 3 districts. Likewise, there would be one independent university would be established. Now, it is again to be a larger extent, it's to be debated, it is to be looked in terms of its feasibility. Everything is worked on. That's how our task force was working on. So, should we term our existing? Should we elevate our existing institutes to MERU, or there should be a separate provision for MERU? But there is going to be an independent, multidisciplinary education research university which should come as a part of this particular policy. Coming to some of the major reforms, I already spoke about the gross enrollment ratio. The big challenge for gross enrollment ratio in higher education is unless and until there is a sizable number of population that passes the junior, that is a +2 at this point in time, we will be not in a position to have a 50% gross enrollment ratio. So it's little, tricky. Because the gross enrollment ratio is calculated again, the population in the age bracket of 18 to 35 as against the total population. So it's going to be, that's the reason it's going to be difficult to reach 50%. But nevertheless, if the school, if we look at the school education, that has undergone a considerable kind of change in the policy. So going with that particular formula, I guess there is a possibility that there's a good number of students who would not get dropped out, and they will eventually pass their +2, or for that matter, the new structure of 344. And with that particular structure, there is a possibility that we may have a kind of a sizable population which we can enroll for higher education. But at the same time, do we have enough institutions to enroll that much of number? And that's the reason there's a provision for increasing the disciplines. There's a provision for increasing the institution, the government owned, or even in the later stages when the policy comes into picture, there will be a kind of an appeal or a kind of a promotion for establishment of institutes in areas which are not densely populated with institutions. Coming to most important aspect of dissemination of education or the structure. I look at it in this way. Unfortunately, what has happened, I call it unfortunately with all the consciousness, we are into education. It's we who have decided how what subjects students have to learn, how they have to learn that. We decided what kind of evaluation system has to be there for them. We decided the grades for them. In the entire context, it is nowhere student-centric. The student as an important stakeholder, as a learner, was never considered as a kind of a stakeholder which can give a kind of an input in terms of framing the policies which should actually take care of the requirements and expectations and the contemporary situation that the students are into. So considering that aspect, the policy is trying to address and is trying to be as flexible or as student-centric as it can with some of the interventions. And some of the interventions are over here. One, a student would be in a position to have multiple entries and exits. Now, there would be everything that I'm pronouncing over here as a part of the policy will have certain kind of challenges, and that's the reason the task force are working on. But I'll just explain to you. One, it will have multiple. So, for example, let's say I joined the first year program, the master program of pharmacy, and after 1 year, I found that maybe for reasons like my personal reasons or any other reasons, I'm unable to continue. Today, if I do that, if I walk out after first year, I'll be considered as a dropout. So I won't get anything out of it. But in the new policy, what it suggests is that in case a student walks out after the first year, he would not be called as a dropout. Rather, he would be getting a certificate in pharmacy, whatever the program that you want to name it. Other, if the same thing happens, if a student walks out after the second year, he is not continuing for the third year. In that situation, the student would get a diploma in pharmacy. And if the student completes all 3 years or 4 years, as the existing programs are, he would get the particular degree. But not that the student walks out with a certificate and he walks out. In case after 2 years, he finds out that there is a conducive situation for him to come back and continue education, he would be getting an entry into the second year. So based on the whatever credit set that he has earned in the first year, he will be getting admission to the second year. So that's how he can exit and he can enter again. So that's where they say that there's a multiple entry and exit. So the issue of dropouts or issue of so what we call as a slow runner, fast runner, to a larger extent is taken care of. That's one. At this point in time, we have programs which are 3 years or 4 years. So the policy suggests that ideally the program would be of 3 years. If there is a fourth year, then in that case, the postgraduate program for that person would be 1 year. So in any case, it's going to be a 5 year with PG. So somebody who takes up a UG program of 4 year, he would be eligible to do his PG program in 1 year. And in case if it is 3 years, then he'll have to put 2 years. So that flexibility is given. And this is very good for people who want to like pursue their education abroad because of the necessity of 4 years, 3 years. So that flexibility will remain. Integrated programs we already have started to a larger extent. The policy very clearly suggests that the MPhil will be discontinued, and in many universities, it's still a kind of a dilemma because it hasn't come in the form of some kind of what we say strict instructions from UGC, because UGC is not in a position to do that because it doesn't fall under the purview of UGC. So that MPhil will be discontinued over a period of time. The most important aspect the policy has suggested is of the ABC, that is the Academic Bank of Credit. Imagine I did my first year of pharmacy in one institution, and for some reason I'm unable to continue now. So I accumulate my credit of first year, and then I go to some other institution and trade those credits with that particular institution and get into second year. Even if I'm unable to continue second year over there, and then I have to move to some other place or maybe a better institution, but I feel is good at that particular aspect which I'm looking for, I can trade those credits that I've accumulated. So what I do is I keep on accumulating the credits which are required, and that credit I'll trade with the institute that I aspire to go for. So the credit would act like those points which makes me qualified to get into any institution which I deserve to get in based on. And that's where, if you like to think it, we have only one single body of accreditation council. So that council will look at the kind of horizontal movement, or even for that matter, vertical movement, or even for that matter, interdisciplinary event, how that would be possible in the circumstances. So that accreditation body would accredit the institutions so as to make them eligible, student making eligible, institution making the provisions that they would be accepting credits from ABC institutes or ABC universities. So this would be a very good thing for the student, because most of the time it so happens a student starts with engineering, and maybe after a year, a student realizes that my passion is more in writing. I'm good at literary skills. So a student can trade those first year credit and get into a different discipline altogether. So that kind of movement is going to be possible. There's anyway going to be major and minor that is going to be offered to the student. So that movement from maybe from engineering to some other discipline, even from that discipline to other discipline. And if a student changes the discipline in an attempt to understand where naturally is a natural kind of skill sets fits into, and with the change of kind of discipline, what kind of degree he would get. So there's also a provision that the policy makes is the degree of fine arts. So the fine arts composes of every possible discipline. It is a combination of all the discipline, be it for science, technology, or social sciences. So the academic bank of credit will take care of lots of dropout. One, it will actually give a kind of an avenue to student in the area what their passion or their natural instinct for learning lies in, and not necessarily make them just because if a student in engineering, a second year of engineering, he realizes that it's not his domain, but he still has to continue that engineering just for the sake of that degree and not lose the year. So that particular kind of constraint is taken out, and the student can move from disciplines so as to get this particular degree. Two or three major ones, and then I'll come to the grants aspect. There's going to be a National Research Foundation, which is going to function under a Higher Education Grant Council, one of the verticals that I spoke about. This NRF would be an autonomous body functioning under the Grant Council, which would take care of inviting proposals, making provisions for institutions so as to promote research, so as to promote innovation, so as to promote different techniques of pedagogy, and also to inculcate the culture of starting or initiating a different programs, very contemporary programs or out-of-box programs. So this National Research Foundation is going, right now we have several agencies which are going into funding, but National Research Foundation would be a kind of a total amalgamation of all those kind of funding agencies. Other aspect is the policy tries to very much emphasis on internalization of education. What it means is that, as of course, there is a foreign education bill that is being there with the government for a very long time. And there would be like provisions made where a foreign institution would come down to India and establish their campuses. But this particular document not only speaks about allowing foreign institutes to come to India, but it tries to make provisions wherein Indian institute would be in a position to establish their campuses abroad. So basically, if you look at the policy, it tries to be focusing on its indigenous nature. I mean, what India constitutes of, what its indigenous skill sets are, what its indigenous knowledge is. And instead of like simply copying or imitating from the Western world, why don't we have our own indigenous, bank on our own indigenous qualifications or skill sets or knowledge and try and leverage on that and promote that into the other countries? Because unfortunately, we all are, I mean, I come from social science discipline, your sciences, but to a larger extent, we are all are obsessed or very easily gets impressed with the kind of anything that comes from the West. A very small example, I'll just put it to you over here, that during 26/11, when the Taj was under attack and with the terrorist, and then a very interesting incident that happened at that point in time. I used to work in Tata Institute at that point in time, so we got this inside stories. When the terrorists were attacking the guest, what the employees of Taj, right from the cook to even the floor managers to the senior managers, what they did is they brought all the guests into the ballroom, the second floor ballroom of the Taj, and they encircled the guest. They put the guest into the ballroom and literally they encircled. They formed a kind of a defense chain so as to protect their guest. Now, imagine a situation of this nature. People are thinking to the extent of not caring for their life. Now, no hotel industry might have thought that such a kind of situation would arise and we need to train our employees in this situation. But so the more presence of mind, and there's a lot of ethos that actually came in. And we thought of writing a case on this. And as a Tata Institute, we four of us from the department, we had the access because being kind of a sister concern, we went and we collected all the data. We interviewed people and we wrote a nice case out of it. And we made it available to most of the institutions in India. Unfortunately, not many actually took that particular case. But when the same case was that some of Harvard professors came across with this particular case, and then they wanted this case to be taught. And we didn't actually, the should never put any kind of fees to it and allowed that thing. And then further, they put that particular same case with little refinement to their own repositories. That is Harvard Business School Review repositories. And when it came out to that repositories, they were takers for that case from all over India. I mean, including IIMs and all the institutions started, taking that case for discussion. But this is where our psyche is. I mean, when it was developed by Indians, and the same case, when it was rooted through Harvard, it got its acceptance. So somewhere we have that biases, and we are brought up with that biases, perhaps. So what I meant by internalization of education, in the sense the policy meant, is that how do we actually take our indigenous knowledge abroad? How do we actually take our most, what do you say, the kind of traditional skill set, because we boast about Nalanda, Takshashila and all that, but somehow we don't reflect onto that. And there is, we are anyway very bad on documenting things right from the day one, perhaps. And that's the reason we find some of the rarest document, our own document in universities abroad. Even in Germany and all that, I came across with some of the documents, the rarest documents written on a leaf and a cloth of paper from Kerala, but we don't have that kind of repositories. So this is where the policy tries to, sorry, I spent a little more time on that because that was a very important aspect of the policy. Vocational and teacher professional education, there's going to be an independent institute which will look into the development of teaching skills. Government of Maharashtra has already instituted an independent company. They have already registered a company for teachers professional education, which is going to come up in Pune. They have already identified the land, so that is also an initiative from Government of Maharashtra. There is a lot of emphasis on, just like we have special economic zones, there's going to be special education zones which are going to be identified into the most interior and tribal areas. There's going to be an increased emphasis, as I said, indigeneity is going to be protected. So that's the reason there's a promotion of languages. There's a huge debate which is happening from last 1 year that suggests education into regional languages. Is that good? Is that not good? It's that they're giving you a room. And in that context, they're going to establish some exclusive universities which would only look into content development into regional languages. Some of the state colleges like COIP has also started its 2 program from this year in Marathi. So it's like an experimentation, perhaps. And what it is empirically proved it as, that any person who learns in their own mother tongue has a better understanding of the topic or subject. His skills are very much like brushed up, and he would be able to comprehend in a much better manner and express as well. But nevertheless, when we look at the globalization, when language as one of the medium, I guess English is also an important aspect. And if you look at all of those Eastern countries like be it Korea, Japan, China, or for even Europe for that matter, they have the regional language education. But in the recent 10 years time, they are introduced English as a compulsory thing. So at least English as a part of communication. If not, English may not be a part of the domain education, but it necessarily needs to be a language to learn. So that kind of formula is the best suited for even in school as well as in colleges. A National Education Technology Forum, because with the pandemic, we have all learned that there's so much of exclusion that has happened because of completely cut off from there's lack of technology, lack of infrastructure. So there's going to be a forum which exclusively have its own funding so as to build the ecosystem for increasing the infrastructure in the area of technology all across India. So there's going to be a separate forum for that. Ministry of HR is already named Ministry of Education, as we see. And the most important is that the policy recommends that there should be expenditure to the tune of 6% of GDP. Now, unfortunately, we haven't reached to that figure. It's not that the first time the policy recommends. Even the earlier policies have recommended 6% of the GDP should go on education. Unfortunately, we haven't even reached to 3%, I believe. Sometimes marginally we might have crossed 3%, and the 3% comprise school education as well as higher education. Within higher education, is a very significant, a very small nominal percentage goes for research and development. So going by the priorities, what we have as a country in terms of social development or economic growth, I guess if education is to be seen as an investment, I guess that would be the right approach to spend 6% of the GDP, because none of our sector would be able to absorb such a kind of population potentially, or vibrant young population, education can. So that kind of expenditure very much required. In our task force also, we have recommended some of the areas where it requires a very immediate attention in terms of building of infrastructure and other knowledge infrastructure as well. Coming to some of the other reforms, when I say interdisciplinary, I mean there are some areas which the policy recommends should be a part of the curriculum, irrespective of which major course the person is doing, be pharmacy, law, architect, or commerce, or engineering, any discipline the person is. They need to be necessarily taken through and sensitized towards issues of this nature. That is, but I'm just cutting it short. But the curriculum should necessarily figure all of those, and this should necessarily be dealt in a kind of an actionable form. That's again another aspect of it. It shouldn't be just a kind of a lecture method. It should be inculcated in the form of some experimentation, that is through experiential learning, through projects or any of the nature. The other area which the policy tries to look at it is that there's an increasing trend of finishing schools. Like some of the industries, they're having their own programs which are like 3 months, 4 months program where they train this candidate and put them onto the job. So such a kind of finishing schools is actually posing a challenge to the existing conventional colleges and institutions. So how we can actually leverage, how we can have a blend of partnership with them. There are certain kind of initiatives which are again recommended in this area as well. Other aspect which they tried to put across is have more emphasis on not just entrepreneurship, but social entrepreneurship, because that's one area which would not only create entrepreneurs and employment, but it also solve the societal problems. That again is an independent area of discussion. I won't get into details of it. Industry contemporary disciplines have to be evolved. Not just industry contemporary disciplines, but also society-specific contemporary disciplines have to be evolved. So that is another one. Coming to the almost the final slide, I spoke about the Grant Council, and I also spoke about National Research Foundation. These are some of the agencies that are going to decide on to the grants, funds, maybe in the form of loans, maybe in the form of grants, maybe in the form of seed capital, whichever form. And this is not exactly a kind of a policy document words. These are the interventions based on various discussions that we had, maybe with the central team as well as within ourselves. When it comes to disseminating grants in any form, there are going to be some areas which the council will look at in priority. And if any institution is actually working in this particular one of the 3 components or all of the 3 components, that institutions would be in a better position to scale up their infrastructure by asking for grants or getting the grants. Now, this should be in the form of IDP, that's the institutional development plans. So a lot will depend on what my institution is doing and what it foresees or what it plans to do in another 5, 10, or 15 years. And if that particular institution development plans covers these 3 areas, and I'll just briefly touch upon those 3 areas, then they that the institution will be eligible for that. One, supporting for strategic focus areas and expanding quality programs. Now, we do have existing programs, which I don't know whether to call them conventional or contemporary, but there are areas like, for example, I'm from a social science, but immediately I may not be able to relate with pharmacy. But for example, social science, are we coming up with any program in smart cities? Are we coming up of any program in urban transport? So likewise, when there's an increased need of certain kind of issues that needs to be addressed in the society. In your case, pharmaceutical case, maybe with the kind of existing pandemic, or the kind of requirement at the international regime, what is the kind of, what do you say, policies that the internet, suppose the US Food and Drug Industry, authority, what they come across with, what is the changes that are happening, what kind of changes the pharmaceutical industries, accordingly, what kind of changes we need to bring in, or are there any kind of gray areas which we cannot address formally? Can we start a program in that particular area? Just like I gave example in social sciences. So if some institution focuses on that particular area and starts a program, a quality program in that particular area, there are high chances that tomorrow, if I start a program in urban transport and smart cities, there are high chances that I would be eligible for the funding to run that particular, or to actually establish that particular program. So that's what I mean by strategy focus areas. Second component is going to be holistic development of the student. I spoke about it right at the beginning, that we are creating potential employees, or we are creating kind of a human resources which are immediately expendable and for any kind of work. But in the process, are we making them strong enough to live with the uncertainty, live with the ambiguity that we have? Because I'm sure, most of us would agree to me that we started as a professor, most of us, and I started as a professor. I'm sure that I'm going to end as a professor. But if you look at today's youth, learning at our institution, I'm not sure they would start maybe as a pharmacist, but they may not end as a pharmacist. There are going to be huge changes in another 10, 30 years. If you look at the 30 years of the work span that they have. And with these changes, they may undergo a kind of not just the lateral shift, but also the vertical shifts, inter kind of professional or career shifts. So this particular uncertainty that's going to be on them, that is going to act on them, or that is going to impress on them, is going to actually test their vulnerability towards the situations. So if I'm not really strong enough to live with that ambiguity, there are possibilities that I may not enjoy what I'm doing. At the end of the day, as we have already discussed most of the time, why we are doing this, we want to create a kind of a happy society, a society which is kind of contented to a larger extent. It's not just that we are looking at the kind of the growth indicators, we're also looking at the development indicators in this context. So are we really doing good on the development indicators? If a small country like Bhutan is scoring much above us in terms of happiness index, what's wrong with the countries like us? Where we are going wrong? Is it that economically, in terms of growth, we're far ahead than a country like Bhutan? But in development indicators, we are far behind. So I guess education is one of the medium which actually will build up a character, would build up a personalities, which should really anchor this particular lifestyle in days to come. And they necessarily don't look just for certainty as a life contentness, but even uncertainty and living with it. And living with it with contentness is going to be important. How do we actually intervene this? As an institution, what kind of programs, what kind of actions, interventions that we take. And if any institution has such a kind of interventions at place, we could build up such a character, a kind of a very composed student, I guess that particular institution again would be eligible for funding in days to come. Finally, we have also heard about corporate social responsibility, but now we speak about institutional social responsibilities. The policy, if I look at it completely, it tries to look at the institution as a change agent for society. At this point in time, we have a very, kind of a very meaningful scheme that the NSS, what we call as the Ministry of Youth Affairs scheme. It has done wonders actually, because in between, we're doing a research on doing a kind of monetary evaluation, work evaluation of the scheme. It ran into perhaps the budget of some ministries. It has done wonders into our society. But over a period of time, it is again a kind of a kind of an activity-based approach. You go do some plantation, come back. But what perhaps the policy looks at this point in time is that can I do some interventions, maybe in the area of livelihood of. I identify a kind of a geography, a demography, and I take a complete hand-holding of that particular geography, demography, or the community. Maybe in terms of developing the livelihood, maybe in terms of education, maybe in terms of health and hygiene. I will partner with many institutions. When I say institution, I mean also the corporates. I will bring in as much as collaborations I can, but I'll run a kind of a program or run a kind of a project which is ongoing in nature with that particular community or with that particular demography. If some institution brings up that kind of project, I guess that institution again is going to be more eligible for some kind of or kind of a larger kind of help in terms of finance and otherwise from the council. So some broader areas which I guess every institution at this point in time needs to focus on, wherein because in days to come, the concept of grant college, low grant college, I guess it is going to go over a period of time, because even the government is not very much in support of this particular formula over a period, because it's not doing much good. Because there are certain sections, we all know granted colleges, the kind of education, vis-a-vis the kind of salaries the government is paying. So somewhere nobody is very much for such a kind of formula. So that's the reason it's good when we have a complete different structure where we have autonomous institutions, de-affiliated colleges, unitary universities. I guess every university or every institution will be eligible for grants, provided they have such a kind of a development plan in days to come. So that was from me. In conclusion, I just sum up. Implement, because when I look at all the policies in the past, none of the policy was implemented to its 100%. There are issues which never got implemented or which got implemented partly, which were never even heard of, only got into central universities. So that's again a key. And the best part is the states are actually making all the attempts to understand their own requirement vis-a-vis the guideline that the policy has suggested. That's one. Second is, as I said, the faculty members are going to be at the center of this particular implementation or the reforms. And if the faculty members are not engaged or contented with their service conditions, with their jobs, with their service, when I mean service conditions, I mean the environment at the work, the kind of profiles that they work on, the salaries that they get, social security measures that they have, the opportunities to work on in different discipline, the time factor efforts, all of those is what I call a service condition. If that is not addressed or taken care of, because every possibility we have this huge divide of institutions which get grants, like for example IITs, IIMs, ICER, and even grant colleges, state universities. They do get grants from the government, and in that context, I mean, to a large extent, they have that liberty to perform, even to not perform also at time and still be in the job. But in terms of private colleges, which constitutes more than like 70% today, uh, which is very unorganized in nature, and the service conditions have remained a big challenge in terms of those institutions. We have put it into our task force recommendations that there has to be a kind of an independent, if not a body, a facilitation center, which would necessarily look at, which would try to rationalize some of the rules and regulations which are existing at this point in time by the regulatory bodies. But just like what happened in labor reforms, I mean, there are, I mean, strictly with the same thing happened with labor in India, because unorganized sector constitutes almost 90%, whereas 10% is very organized and protected sector. When the reforms were brought in, the rationalization in labor was brought in, many industries actually started following it, and the laborers got benefited out of it. So can something of that nature be taught in education institute as well, wherein the private unaided institution, I mean, of course, they will have their own ways and means of bringing up their programs, but at the same time, they need some capacity building, and for that they need some kind of assistance, maybe in the form of finance or otherwise, and more importantly, to develop their own faculty. So this particular recommendation is more spoken about. The center, as I say, Sustainable Development Goal 4, which speaks about equity and inclusion, that's going to be at the center of it. And as I said in the earlier slide, that an education which necessarily has to build character, rationality, the social sensitivity, along with employability, is going to be a more crucial thing. And then only perhaps we would say that the policy has done justice to the existing population, I mean the youth population rather, in the country. I think whatever I said finally gets sums up in just one statement, because whatever rationale we discussed and the statement explains by John Davy, which I have always quoted at many places, that if we teach today as we taught yesterday, we rob our children of tomorrow. I mean, this is how the time is changing so rapidly in terms of technology, in terms of societal expectation, in terms of consumerism. Everything is changing over a period of time. And to add to that, such natural calamities as well as man-made calamities, what are we experiencing? So the methodologies have to be different, the curriculums have to be different, priorities have to be different. And if you don't adopt that, perhaps we rob our children of tomorrow. So with this particular note and hope, I conclude. I think if I apologize, I mean, I'm sorry in case I have exceeded my time, but somehow I feel a little passionate to speak about. I did. Sorry once again if I exceeded, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. There is no question of apologies, because as a moderator, I'm seeing the number is still stagnant. The delegates are really enjoyed your talk. So on behalf of IPA Pune, thank you so much, Dr. Golar, sir, for this very illustrative insights on National Education Policy 2020, that you include the Rationale framework, policy, major reforms, and definitely I can make a mention that there is a huge responsibility on teacher fraternity to create a future tomorrow that will build the nation as well as to fulfill the industry as well. So with this, I thank you on behalf of IPO Pune. So next, the panelist, we have our own Dr. Atmaram Pawar. Sir, this will be a very formal. I need to introduce Dr. Atmaram Pawar, sir, that all pharma fraternity know Dr. Atmaram Pawar, sir, but as a part of a moderator, I would like to go through a brief bio sketch of Dr. Atmaram Pawar. Dr. Atmaram Pawar is a past president of IPA Pune. He is currently a convener of Indian Pharmaceutical Pune. He is a principal of Bharati Vidyapit's Pune College of Pharmacy. We all know he is a leading academic author. He is an expert member of various regulatory academic bodies, PCI, AICT, a nation's leading community pharmacist and column writer. His work in patient counseling and pharmacy practice is noteworthy, which has done a great job in enhance the health of a community. We know his contribution is a 360, not only in pharmacy education, and his efforts are really noteworthy to build the pharmacy profession. With this brief introduction, now it's my duty to request our next panelist, second panelist, Dr. Atmaram Pawar. Over to you, Pawar.
Namaskar. ऐकू येते ना?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So namaskar. Good evening to the and thanks to the IPA, particularly the president, Dr. Manohar Patil, and the moderator Chandrasekhar Bobde, and the committee. And very happy to present here in the Pune for Pune leaders the things what will happen after 2 to 3 years. So a very nice talk is given by Devdas Gollor sir, and it shows that the blending, we are blending BCom with BPharm. ज्यावेळी बीफार्म आम्ही करत होतो त्यावेळी लोक विचारायचे अरे काय शिकतोय, तर आम्ही म्हणायचो बीफार्म. मग बीकॉमला पुण्याला कशाला गेला, बीकॉम इथं नाही का? तर गल्लोर सर आता बीफार्म आणि बीकॉम लांब राहणार नाहीये, एकत्र जाणार आहे. कारण हा बीफार्मचा मुलगा पण आता अकाउंटन्सी इन फायनान्स करणार आहे, कारण हे नवीन एज्युकेशन पॉलिसी आहे. आणि परत जरी आम्ही फार्मसी म्हटलं तर म्हणायचं मग शेती करणार आहेस का? तर ह्या सगळ्या गोष्टी तेवढंच सांगायचं आहे की आता फार्मसी शेती पण करू शकेल आणि फायनान्स पण बघू शकेल. ही सर्व गोष्ट या नॅशनल एज्युकेशन पॉलिसीमध्ये येणार आहे. आता आपल्याकडे साधारणतः 60 लोक आहेत, 60च्या 60 मराठी समजतात आणि लोकल लँग्वेजला महत्त्व द्यायचं नवीन एज्युकेशन पॉलिसीमध्ये. म्हणून मी आता का चांगल्या मराठीमध्ये जेवढं काय जमेल ते, माझी भाषा पुणेरी नाहीये, सातारी कोल्हापुरी आहे. तर पहिल्यांदा माणूस अध्यापक बनतो, नंतर प्राध्यापक बनतो आणि शेवटी ज्ञानेश्वर बनतो. अध्यापक बनतो त्यावेळी त्याला फक्त आपण पुस्तकात दिलंय ते मुलांच्या पर्यंत पोहोचवायचं असतं, त्याला आपण इन्फॉर्मेशन म्हणतो. ज्यावेळी तो नॉलेज आणि स्किल देईल त्याला प्राध्यापक म्हणतो. आणि ज्यावेळी त्याला विस्डम मिळेल, एक शहाणपण येईल, त्याला आपण ज्ञानेश्वर म्हणतो. तर भारताला आता अध्यापक क्लार्क तयार करायचे नाहीत, तर त्यांना ज्ञानेश्वर तयार करायचे आहेत. त्या माणसाला सर्व काही यायला पाहिजे असा माणूस तयार करायचा आहे. आणि म्हणूनच हे नवीन एज्युकेशन पॉलिसीचं थीम आहे आणि हे थीम आपण पुढे घेऊन येतोय. आणि मी पुणे कॉलेज ऑफ फार्मसी भारतीय विद्यापीठ रिप्रेझेंट करतोय इथे. तर आयुष्यात पहिला आपल्याला क्लिअर पाहिजे की मला का शिकायचंय. इथे आई त्या बाळाला मारतीये आणि म्हणते की मैंने इसको कहा की पढ़ ले, अच्छा पढ़ ले, अच्छी बीवी मिलेगी. कारण आमचं ध्येय काय असतं की लग्न, नवरा चांगला मिळावा, बायको चांगली मिळावी म्हणून आपण शिकतो. तर तो मुलगा हुशार असतो आईपेक्षा आणि बापापेक्षा. तर तो पण म्हणतो अगं बाबा एम.फार्म PhD आहेत ना. अरे मग अशी गोष्ट आहे की आपण शिकतो कशासाठी. आपण हायर एज्युकेशन घेतो. BA BCom घेत होतो, पण परत 90 पासून प्रोफेशनल डिग्रीचं एज्युकेशन घ्यायला लागलो, कारण तिथं नोकऱ्या पटकन मिळायला लागल्या. पण एक आपण करतो का की आपण ज्ञानेश्वर होतो का, आपण नॉलेज आणि लाईफलॉंग लर्नर बनतो का, हा विषय आपण बाजूला ठेवला. याला कारण आपल्याला फक्त परीक्षेमध्ये चांगले मार्क मिळवायचे आहेत. आणि आता सरांनी सांगितल्याप्रमाणे, देवदास गल्लोड सरांनी सांगितल्याप्रमाणे मार्क कसे मिळतात, तर पाठांतरावर मिळतात. कारण आज ही माझ्या देशात डिफाईन, डिस्कस आणि क्लासिफाय असे 90% क्वेश्चन असतात. एखादा क्वेश्चन जर का उलटून पालटून विचारला तर त्याला आम्ही आउट ऑफ सिलेबस म्हणून जाहीर करून टाकतो आणि त्या मास्टरला परत आम्ही म्हणतो की डिफाईन, डिस्कस आणि क्लासिफायच करत जा. आणि म्हणून मग मित्रांना ज्यावेळी अडचण येते परीक्षेवेळी, तो म्हणतो सिर्फ मुझे एक वर्ड बता दे पहिला. तू पहिला शब्द सांगितलास मी अखंड 10 मार्काची 3 पानं लिहिणार आहे. आधी मध्ये रंगोट्या काढणार आहे, एक लागू किंवा न लागू फिगर काढणार आहे आणि एवढं केलं की मला डिस्टिंक्शन मिळणार आहे. मित्रत्व शेवटी करावंच लागतं, म्हणून दुसरा मित्र त्याला शब्द देतो द. तर आपलं हे एज्युकेशन आहे ते ओका आणि ठोकावर आहे आणि त्याच्यातून आपल्याला बाहेर पडायचं आहे. आणि म्हणूनच ही मोठी पॉलिसी भारत बदलायला पुढे येत आहे. सरांनी सांगितल्याप्रमाणे सर्वच सरांनी इश्यू कव्हर केलेले आहेत. मला फक्त ते आता फार्मसीला अप्लाय करायचं आहे. एकदम सोपं आहे हे गोष्ट समजली तर, आणि अवघड आहे ती करण्यासाठी, आणि म्हणून लीडर लोकांची गरज आहे. आणि आज मला इथं आनंद वाटतो की 60 फार्मसीतले लीडर इथे आलेले आहेत. लीडरला जर काही समजलं नाही तर ते ऑटोनॉमी मिळवणं आणि हायर एज्युकेशन मध्ये जाणं खूप गडबड होणार आहे. तर पहिला लीडर परमनंट आहे का हे कॉलेजला बघावं लागणार आहे. हे पण आपण पुढे बघू. तर हाच एक हेतू जो सरांनी सांगितला होता की हार्मफुल सीओल्स ऑफ हायर एज्युकेशन. आम्ही भिंती बांधले. आम्ही BA BCom इंजिनिअरिंग फार्मसीच्या भिंती नाही बांधलेल्या सर. आम्ही M.Pharm फार्मास्युटिक्स, M फार्मास्युटिकल केमिस्ट्री, M.Pharm फार्मेकॉलॉजी, M.Pharm कोग्नसी. कोग्नसीचा मुलगा केमिस्ट्रीत दिसला की केमिस्ट्रीच्या यसोडीचं डोकं सटकतं सर. तू इथं कसं काय आलास, तू कशात शिकतोयस, तू कोग्नसीत शिकतोयस तर तू कोग्नसीच्या लॅबमध्ये बसायचं बाळ. केमिस्ट्रीच्या इन्स्ट्रुमेंटला हात लावायचा नाही. केमिस्ट्रीचा माणूस जर का सुटिक्स मध्ये PhD करायला आला तर म्हणतो अरे तुझी तरी PG केमिस्ट्री मध्ये आहे, तुला फॉर्म्युलेशन डेव्हलपमेंट बनवायचा हक्क नाही. ही तुझी चूक आहे का बरोबर आहे आम्हाला माहित नाही, पण तू मोठी चूक केलीस. तू M.Pharm केमिस्ट्रीत केलं, आता तुला आयुष्यभर केमिस्ट्री करायचं आहे. सुटिकच्या नादाला लागू नको, कोलॉजीच्या नादाला लागू नको. कारण आम्ही अशा भिंती मजबूत बांधलेत की आम्ही आमच्यातच आम्ही लॅबमध्ये वेगळ्या केलेत. आमचे मास्टर डिपार्टमेंट वेगळे, एकमेकाला बोलायचं नाही, माझ्या डिपार्टमेंट तुला सांगायचं नाही. आणि आम्ही म्हणतो की आमची मुलं पूर्ण बनायला पाहिजेत, होलिस्टिक पाहिजेत. होलिस्टिक कधी बनेल माणूस, जर का त्या माणसाला फार्मास्युटिकल केमिस्ट्री करायची आहे, त्याला ड्रग डिझाईन हे 2 कोर सब्जेक्ट आहेत, आणि त्याचबरोबर तो इंजिनिअरिंगचा केमिकल इंजिनिअरिंग शिकतोय, त्याचबरोबर तो क्लिनिकल टॉक्सिसिटी शिकतोय, आयुर्वेदिक मधला रसद्रव्य शिकतोय, युनानीतली रसद्रव्य शिकतोय, तो थोडं म्युझिक पण शिकतोय. आणि असा जर बनला तर तो API म्हणजे ऍक्टिव्ह फार्मास्युटिकल इन्ग्रेडियंट मस्तपैकी बनवू शकतो. पण त्याला हे नॉलेज आम्ही दिलंच नाही. फक्त केमिस्ट्री शिकतो तर केमिस्ट्री शिक, अजिबात कोलॉजीत तू डोकं घालू नको, नाहीतर मग कोलॉजीत ऍडमिशन घे. आम्ही भिंती बांधतो, आम्ही दरवाजे आम्ही लॅबचे बंद करतो. तर आता हे होणार नाहीये. आणि सरांनी सांगितल्याप्रमाणे हेल्थ युनिव्हर्सिटी, टेक्निकल युनिव्हर्सिटी, ऍग्रिकल्चर युनिव्हर्सिटी या सर्व संपुष्टात येणार. आता फक्त युनिव्हर्सिटी, फक्त हायर एज्युकेशन इन्स्टिट्यूट. तुम्ही मल्टीडिसिप्लिनरी असायला हवं, तुम्ही एकमेकाच्या बरोबर जायला हवं. हेच करून तुम्हाला आता एक युनिव्हर्सिटी स्टेटस मध्ये यायचं आहे. तर स्टेट युनिव्हर्सिटी जे आहेत, पुणे विद्यापीठाची जी कमान आहे त्याच्या अंडरच पुणे विद्यापीठ राहणार आहे. त्याच्या बाहेर पुणे विद्यापीठ नाही. त्यांनी त्यांची उंची वाढवायची आहे आणि आम्ही आमची उंची वाढवायची आहे. आम्हाला डीम्ड युनिव्हर्सिटी करायची आहे, आम्हाला प्रायव्हेट युनिव्हर्सिटी करायची आहे. हे जे आत्ता चाललंय त्याचं सर्वांचं कन्व्हर्शन एक दिवस फक्त युनिव्हर्सिटीमध्ये होईल. आणि ती प्रत्येक युनिव्हर्सिटी ऑटोनॉमस असते. आता सरांनी सांगितल्याप्रमाणे हे 3 ग्रुप आहेत ऑटोनॉमस डिग्री कॉलेज. साधारणतः आता आपली जी कॉलेज बघितली तर डिग्री कॉलेजमध्ये जाऊ शकतात, पण याच्यातच मी जर का माझ्या शेजारच्या आर्ट कॉमर्स बरोबर टाईप केला, माझ्या मॅनेजमेंट कॉलेज बरोबर टाईप केला, इंजिनिअरिंग कॉलेज बरोबर टाईप केला, तर मी मल्टीडिसिप्लिनरी होईल आणि मला एक टीचिंगची युनिव्हर्सिटी माझी होईल. आणि जर का मी रिसर्च करायला चालू केला तर माझी रिसर्च युनिव्हर्सिटी होईल. तर ह्या सर्व स्टेपमध्ये मला ग्रोथचा फॅक्टर आहे. मी साध्या कॉलेजपासून रिसर्च युनिव्हर्सिटी पर्यंत जाऊ शकतो. तुमचा जसा ग्रोथ होईल आणि तुम्ही जसे मोठे व्हाल तसेच. म्हणून इथं क्लस्टरची गरज आहे. फार्मास्युटिकल केमिस्ट्री, क्लिनिकल फार्मसी, हर्बल अँड ड्रग केमिस्ट्री हे मी सांगितले कोर सब्जेक्ट आहेत, पण त्याचबरोबर त्याला परफॉर्मिंग आर्ट. अहो सध्या माणूस हा आत्महत्या करतो. का आत्महत्या करतो? कारण त्याला चॅलेंज दिले की तुला डॉक्टर बनायचंय, तुला हे व्हायचंय, तुला ते व्हायचंय. ते जमना की तो लगेच आत्महत्या करतो. पण त्याला मी सोशल सायन्स शिकवलंच नाही, त्याला काउन्सिलिंग शिकवलं नाही, त्याला चांगलं गाणं येतं तर डान्स येतं, जर डान्स करत असता त्याला मी पाठ थोपटली असती तर त्यानं कदाचित हे केलं असतं. आणि माझ्या आयुष्यात झालेलं आहे. मी सेकंड इयरला फार्मसी कॉलेज सोडून चाललो होतो, पण त्याच वेळी मी एक एकांकिका केली आणि एकांकिकेमुळे आत्माराम पवार जरा प्रसिद्ध झाला कॉलेजमध्ये. आणि आज आत्माराम पवार तुमच्या पुढे भाषण देतोय फक्त माझ्या त्या 1-2 एकांकिकेच्या नावावर. नाहीतर फार्मसीला कंटाळून मी कोर सब्जेक्टला कधीच चाललो होतो. म्हणूनच ही संधी आहे. जर का माणसाला परिपूर्ण बनवायचं असेल तर त्याला अनेक शिक्षणं एकत्र द्यावी लागतील. कोर सब्जेक्टवर त्याला डिग्री मिळेल, पण त्याचबरोबर त्याला जगण्यासाठी, पगारासाठी तुम्हाला कोर सब्जेक्ट द्या आणि जगण्यासाठी त्याला सेकंडरी सब्जेक्ट द्या. हे दिलं तरच पुढे जाईल. आणि हे जर द्यायचं असेल तर माझं फक्त एकट्याचं एकच फार्मसी कॉलेज आहे. तुम्हाला खूप अवघड जाईल. फक्त माझ्या संस्थेची फार्मसी कॉलेजेस ह्या कॅम्पसमध्ये आहेत, खूप अवघड जाईल. पण माझ्या ह्या कॅम्पसमध्ये इंजिनिअरिंग कॉलेज आहे, आर्ट सायन्स कॉलेज आहे, परफॉर्मिंग आर्ट आहे, बीकॉम आहे, BA आहे. मस्त कॅम्पस आहे. तुम्ही क्लस्टर बनवू शकता. पण आता विचार करा, मैत्री करायचा. नाहीतर फार्मसीचा म्हणून आपण खूप आकडत होतो. तर आता BA BCOMच्या पण प्राचार्यांना नमस्कार करत जावा, कारण तिथं आपली मुलं जाणार आहेत. आणि ह्यासाठीच लवकरात लवकर ज्यांनी प्रत्येकाने ऍक्रेडिटेशन करा, MBA करा, NAC करा, डिप्लोमा वाल्या सुद्धा करा, कारण डिप्लोमा सुद्धा आता हायर एज्युकेशन मध्ये येणार आहे. त्यामुळे हा एक चांगला मेसेज मला इथं द्यावासा वाटतो. सरांनी सांगितल्याप्रमाणे बरेच आपण हे वेगवेगळे ग्रुप केलेले आहेत, जनरल, टेक्निकल, हेल्थ, व्होकेशनल, लिबरल. आता हे एकत्र आणायचं आहे. पण मला इथं सांगायला आनंद वाटतो की फार्मसी ही आमचं सर पहिल्यापासूनच मल्टीडिसिप्लिनरी आहे. आम्ही जेवढं फार्मास्युटिकल टेक्नॉलॉजी शिकतो, ड्रग सिंथेसिस शिकतो, फॉर्म्युलेशन शिकतो, प्रोडक्शन शिकतो, इन्स्ट्रुमेंटेशन शिकतो, तेवढंच आम्ही प्रॅक्टिस शिकतो, क्लिनिकल फार्मसी शिकतो, कम्युनिटी फार्मसी शिकतो, हॉस्पिटल फार्मसी शिकतो. तेवढंच आम्ही अलाइड शिकतो, मार्केटिंग शिकतो, रेग्युलेशन शिकतो, IPR शिकतो, QA शिकतो, NABH शिकतो. फक्त आमच्याकडे फ्लेक्झिबिलिटी नाही. एकदा सिलेबस आम्ही अगोदर युनिव्हर्सिटी वाले करायचो, पण आता काउन्सिल म्हणतं की देशामध्ये एकच सिलेबस. ही एक गोष्ट आहे की आमच्याकडे फ्लेक्झिबिलिटी नाही. त्यामुळं मुलाला आवडू दे का न आवडू दे, त्याला ती केमिस्ट्री शिकावंच लागतं. त्याला मार्केटिंग जायचं असलं तर स्ट्रक्चर पाठ करावंच लागतं. एवढी फ्लेक्झिबिलिटी जर आम्हाला मिळाली तर फार्मसी सारखा सुंदर असा प्रोग्राम नाहीये. आणि दुसरी गोष्ट आम्ही काय झाली, नोकरी मिळवून देणारा आज कोर्स आहे मार्केटिंग, नोकरी देऊन देणारा कोर्स आहे रेग्युलेशन, नोकरी मिळवून देणारा आज कोर्स आहे IPR. पण ज्या लेक्चरचा वर्कलोड ऍडजस्ट होत नाही, युजली फार्माकोग्नोसीचा लेक्चरर, त्याला हे विषय मी कंपल्सरी घ्यायला लावतो. आणि आम्ही इथंच सायन्सला मारतो आणि फक्त सर्टिफिकेटला आम्ही म्हणजे नॉलेजला मारतो आणि सर्टिफिकेटला महत्व देतो. आणि हे ह्या नवीन एज्युकेशन पॉलिसीमध्ये नक्कीच बदलणार आहे. कारण मार्केटिंगचं एज्युकेशन तो मुलगा माझा मार्केट कॉलेजला जाऊन शिकणार आहे. हा फरक आहे. म्हणून क्लस्टरमध्ये आम्हाला पॅशनेट टीचर पण पाहिजेत, कारण पॅशनेट आम्हाला स्टुडंट बनवायचे आहेत. आम्हाला पगारदार स्टुडंट बनवायचे नाहीत, पॅशनेट स्टुडंट बनवायचे आहेत. तरच काहीतरी इनोव्हेशन होईल. यासाठी हे मी बोलतो. दुसरी गोष्ट मला सांगायची आहे की आज जर का तुम्ही न्यू एज्युकेशन पॉलिसी पाहिली तर टेक्निकल मध्ये काय येतं, इंजिनिअरिंग, टेक्नॉलॉजी, आर्किटेक्चर, टाउन प्लॅनिंग, फार्मसी मॅनेजमेंट, हॉटेल मॅनेजमेंट, कॅटरिंग. जर काही असंच राहिलं तर मला सांगावं लागेल की आम्ही फक्त भाऊ टेक्निकल नाहीये, आम्ही फक्त AICT वाली नाहीये, आमच्याकडे फार्मडी पण आहे, कम्युनिटी फार्मसी आहे तिथे, क्लिनिकल फार्मसी आहे तिथे, आम्ही डॉक्टरांच्या बरोबर पण काम करतो. म्हणून कदाचित ही अडचण आम्हाला होऊ शकते पुढे, की फक्त फार्मसीला टेक्निकल मध्ये घेऊ नका, इंजिनिअरिंग करणारा मुलगा सुद्धा फार्मसी ग्रॅज्युएट म्हणून बाहेर पडायला पाहिजे, MBBS ला ऍडमिशन घेणारा सुद्धा फार्मसी ग्रॅज्युएट म्हणून बाहेर पडायला पाहिजे, किंवा फार्मसीमध्ये ऍडमिशन घेणारा मुलगा सुद्धा डॉक्टर आणि इंजिनियर बनायला पाहिजे. तर ही फार्मसीची अशी गोष्ट आहे, म्हणून फार्मसी काउन्सिल इंडिया, APTI आणि सर्वांना सांगतो की ही गरज आपल्याला आता आहे, की आपल्याला टेक्निकल आणि प्रॅक्टिस ओरिएंटेड आपण आहे हे आपल्याला इथून पुढे रुजवावं लागेल. आपल्याला हायर एज्युकेशनला आपल्या लीडर लोकांना सांगावं लागेल. सरांनी सांगितलं त्याचं मी इंटरप्रिटेशन हे असं केलेलं आहे. माझा हा संपूर्ण व्हिडिओ युट्यूबवर आहे. तर आपल्याला सर्टिफिकेट कोर्स आहे. प्रत्येक 1 वर्ष 2 वर्ष 3 वर्ष 4 वर्ष मुलगा शिकणार आहे, पण प्रत्येक वर्षामध्ये त्याला काहीतरी चांगलं शिकवलं जायला पाहिजे. कारण एका वर्षात सर्टिफिकेट कोर्स देतो म्हणजे त्याचे जे काही 4-5 सब्जेक्ट आहेत ते त्याला कुठेतरी जॉब मिळवून द्यायला पाहिजे, तेवढं त्याला शिकवायला पाहिजे. सेकंड इयरला आपण त्याला तेवढं शिकवायला पाहिजे. तर हे चॅलेंज आहे. तर चॅलेंज कसं घ्यायला पाहिजे, तर गुड पॅकेज ऑफ नॉलेज अँड स्किल्स पर इयर आपल्याला द्यावं लागेल. पहिल्या वर्षी जर का तो फक्त फार्मसीला येत असेल तर स्किल ऍज असिस्टंट म्हणून मेडिकल स्टोअरमध्ये त्यानं काम करता यायला पाहिजे, त्याला लॅबमध्ये आपल्या एखाद्या असिस्टंट म्हणून काम करता यायला पाहिजे. तर एवढं तरी कमीत कमी नॉलेज आपल्याला द्यायला पाहिजे. कदाचित आपलं असं होईल की डिग्री कॉलेजला, आता आपण जे म्हणतो डिग्री कॉलेज डिप्लोमा कॉलेज हे सगळं बंद होऊन जाईल, पण 2 वर्षाचा जो डिप्लोमा आहे तो डिप्लोमा कॉलेजला करू दे किंवा बीफार्म कॉलेजला करू दे, म्हणजे डिप्लोमा ग्रॅज्युएट आपले दोन्हीकडून होऊ शकतात आता. म्हणजे आपल्या डिप्लोमा कॉलेजचा सिलेबस आणि आपल्या 2 वर्षाचा डिग्रीचा सिलेबस जर का समानच असेल तर आपण त्याला डिप्लोमा फार्मसी म्हणून आपल्या पण कॉलेजमधून तो मुलगा बाहेर पडू शकतो. एवढी कॅपॅसिटी आपण डेव्हलप करायला पाहिजे. थर्ड इयरला जर शिकला तर त्याला प्रोडक्शन यायला पाहिजे, इन्स्ट्रुमेंटेशन यायला पाहिजे, मार्केटिंग यायला पाहिजे, म्हणजे तो एका कंपनीत जाऊ शकतो. आणि फोर्थ इयर जर शिकला तर त्याला एमफार्म साठी जाण्यासाठी त्याला तयार करायला पाहिजे, रिसर्च साठी तयार करायला पाहिजे. म्हणून असा सिलेबस आता इथून पुढे होणं खूप गरजेचं आहे आणि सिलेबस बनवायचा शेवटी आपल्यालाच आहे, ते पुढे पुढे होईल. अश्युरन्स ऑफ सफिशियंट एनरोलमेंट आता आपल्याला एक खूप महत्वाचं आहे. स्टुडंट सगळ्यात बेनिफिट आहे, फ्रीडम टू डिस्कंटिन्यू अँड रिएंटर ऍट एनी स्टेज. म्हणजे तुमच्याकडे तो पहिले तुमचे फार्मसीचे कोर सब्जेक्ट घेऊन तुमच्या कॉलेजला ऍडमिशन घेतलं होतं त्यानं, पण तो तिथे राहिला का नाही, राहणार का नाही, हे तुम्ही ठरवणार आहात. तुम्ही त्या मुलाला किती गोडी लावता, तुम्ही किती शिकवता आणि त्या मुलाची पॅशन, त्याची इंटरेस्ट तयार होतो का. नाहीतर तुमच्याकडे आलेला मुलगा कधी इंजिनिअरिंग मध्ये जाईल किंवा मेडिकल मध्ये जाईल किंवा आर्ट कॉमर्सला जाईल सांगता येणार नाही. म्हणून हे एक चॅलेंज आहे इथे. म्हणून अट्रॅक्ट आणि रिटेन ऑफ स्टुडंट हे चॅलेंज आहे. तुम्हाला पहिलं तुमच्या कॉलेजला त्यांना ऍडमिशन घ्यायला पाहिजे आणि ऍडमिशन घेतल्यानंतर तो 4 वर्ष रिटेन व्हायला पाहिजे. ही कॅपॅसिटी आपल्याला चॅलेंजिंग आहे. कारण आता आपल्याला 2 गोष्टी आहेत, फायनान्शियल फिजिबिलिटी, मुलं माझ्याकडे आली, माझ्याकडे टिकली तरच माझे पगार होतील, माझी संस्था चालेल. म्हणजे किती काम करावं लागेल आपल्याला बघा. प्रोफेशनचं नाव करावं लागेल, युनिव्हर्सिटीचं नाव करावं लागेल. टीचर लोकांना फक्त आता असं कोण कोण म्हणतील, आता काय प्रायव्हेट युनिव्हर्सिट्या होतील, पास करतील, 2-4 वर्ष पास पण करतील, पण 5व्या वर्षी पास करता येणार नाही, क्वालिटी शिवाय काय होणार नाहीये. तर क्वालिटी ही मेंटेन करायलाच लागेल, कारण इथून पुढे तुम्हाला आता कोणत्याही युनिव्हर्सिटीचं नाव नाहीये. आत्ताचं स्ट्रक्चर बघाल, 10% कॉलेजेस एकदम ओके असतात, त्याच्या नावावर युनिव्हर्सिटी चालते, हे युनिव्हर्सिटीची कॉलेज मस्त असतात. आणि अनेक कॉलेजेस ही कशी तरी असतात. आता त्या कॉलेजना मात्र खूप टेन्शन आणि काम करावं लागेल, कारण तुमचं ॲफिलिएशन पुणे विद्यापीठ, मुंबई विद्यापीठ हे ॲफिलिएशन जाणार आहे आणि तुमचंच ॲफिलिएशन तुम्हाला येणार आहे. म्हणून मला इथं वाटतं आज ज्या युनिव्हर्सिटी डीम्ड युनिव्हर्सिटी आहेत, प्रायव्हेट युनिव्हर्सिटी आहेत किंवा ज्या आता होऊ घातलीत, त्या कदाचित ह्या प्रोसेसमध्ये एक स्टेप पुढे जातील आणि पुढे असतील. पीजी प्रोग्राम 2 वर्षाचा आहे किंवा 1 वर्षाचा आहे. 4 वर्षाचं जर का अंडर ग्रॅज्युएट केलं तर 1 वर्षामध्ये पीजी होतं, कारण फोर्थ इयरला त्याला रिसर्चच करायचं आहे म्हणून. तर असं ह्या 2 वर्षाचा कोर्स बद्दल आहे. पुढे आपण जाऊ की आपल्याला फायदे काय आहेत. आता फॅकल्टीला पहिला फ्रीडम टू डिझाईन देअर ओन करिक्युलम आहे. आपल्याला आपला सिलेबस बनवायचा आहे. नक्कीच जनरल एज्युकेशन काउन्सिल त्याला गाईडलाईन देणार आहे, पण त्या गाईडलाईन नुसार सिलेबस आपल्याला आपले प्राध्यापक बनवणार आहे. त्यात व्होकेशनल एज्युकेशन असणार आहे. ते व्होकेशनल एज्युकेशन तुम्ही डिस्टन्स लर्निंगने देऊ शकता किंवा एखाद्या एनजीओ बरोबर पार्टनर बरोबर तुम्ही टाईप करू शकता, म्हणजे तुमचा स्कोप वाढायला पाहिजे. लीडर लोकांचं काम वाढलं आणि सुदैवानं आपल्याकडे 60 एक लीडर इथे हे ऐकतायत. क्रायटेरिया बेस्ड ग्रेडिंग आहे, इंडियन लँग्वेज मध्ये शिकवायचं आहे आपल्याला. आत्ताच आपल्याला बघितलं तर अनेक ठिकाणी असे कॉलेजेस चालू झालेले आहेत. तर हीच गोष्ट आपल्याला चॅलेंज सुद्धा काय देऊ शकते हे बघावं लागेल. टीचर हा शब्द खूप चांगला आहे आणि खरं असंच असावं. टीचिंग ड्युटीज शुड नॉट बी एक्सेसिव्ह, कारण त्यानं रिसर्च करायला पाहिजे, स्टुडंट्स इंटरॅक्ट व्हायला पाहिजे वगैरे वगैरे आहे. आणि तो फुल टाइम टीचर असावा. हे का मला महत्वाचं वाटतं सांगायला, कारण आता त्याच्या पुढचं चॅलेंज आहे. मग तो टीचर फुल टाइम पाहिजे त्या इन्स्टिट्यूटमध्ये, कारण पॉलिसी काय म्हणते, तो टीचरला त्या कॉलेजबद्दल आत्मीयता यायला पाहिजे. ही शुड फील कमिटेड टू देअर इन्स्टिट्यूट. म्हणून तुम्हाला फुल टाइम टीचर पाहिजे, तुम्हाला आर्टिस्ट पाहिजेत. म्हणजे तुमचं क्लस्टर आहे 5 कॉलेजचं, तर तिथं तुम्ही एक डान्सवाला शिकवू शकता, एक गाणंवाला ठेवू शकता. आणि ही लोक गरज आहेत, कारण असे सब्जेक्ट तुम्हाला घ्यावे लागणार आहेत. मग चॅलेंज काय आलं, तर माझ्याकडे सिनियर फॅकल्टी आहे का, माझ्याकडे पॅसिनेटेड फॅकल्टी आहे का, कुठं जॉब मिळाला नाही म्हणून टीचिंगला आलाय का त्याला टीचिंग करायचं होतं म्हणून आलाय, हे महत्वाचं आहे. टिकून राहिलाय का तुमचा प्राध्यापक, की पहिल्या वर्षी तुमच्याकडे होता, ट्रेनिंग घेतलं, पुढच्या वर्षी निघून गेला, मग सिलेबस कोण करणार तुमचा. तर आउटस्टँडिंग लिडरशिप पाहिजे इथे. लिडरशिपनी फक्त लेक्चर होतात का आणि प्रॅक्टिकल कंडक्ट होतात का एवढ्याच बघण्यासाठी लिडरशिप पुरेशी नाहीये. त्याला BA BComच्या नेडिंगच्या माणसाबरोबर टाईप करता यायला पाहिजे. त्याला एवढा सर्व एकदम डायनॅमिक एज्युकेशन आहे, त्याला कंट्रोल करता यायला पाहिजे. म्हणून लिडरशिप ही कधी सुद्धा फेकंड नसायला पाहिजे. तुमचा रिटायरिंग होणारा प्रिन्सिपल आणि नवीन प्रिन्सिपलनं कमीत कमी 1 वर्ष तरी एकत्र काढायला पाहिजे. म्हणजे संस्थेला 2 प्रिन्सिपलचा पगार एखाद्या वर्षी द्यावा लागेल. फर्दर चॅलेंजेस, अनसर्टन स्टुडंट एनरोलमेंट. गॅरंटी नाहीये की ह्या वर्षी माझ्याकडे किती मुलं येतील. फर्स्ट इयरला 60 मुलं आली, सेकंड इयरला 60 राहतील का निघून जातील, हे सर्व अनसर्टेनिटी आहे. म्हणूनच टीचर हा सुद्धा मल्टीफॅसिटेड पाहिजे. कदाचित त्याला केमिस्ट्री शिकवता आलं नाही, मुलं नाही तर त्याला सुद्धा सुटिक्स आणि कोग्नसी पण शिकवता यायला पाहिजे. तर ही अशी गोष्ट आहे, तर तुमच्याकडे तो टीचर परमनंट राहू शकतो. तर सिलेक्ट अ पर्टिक्युलर, मुलाला फ्रीडम आहे, तो कधीही कोणत्याही वर्षी कुठलं तरी वेगळं डिसिप्लिन, वेगळी युनिव्हर्सिटी हे निवडू शकतो. ही त्याच्याकडे कॅपॅसिटी आहे, कारण त्याची क्रेडिट बँक आहे. त्याच्याबरोबर त्याची मार्क, गव्हर्नमेंट त्याची मार्क ठेवणार आहे आणि जो कुठं पुढे जाईल त्याला ती मार्क त्याला मिळणार आहे. स्टुडंटला खूप फ्लेक्झिबिलिटी दिलेली आहे. फक्त एवढंच आहे की टीचर हा पक्का पाहिजे त्या कॉलेजला, पण स्टुडंट हा काय आहे, FMG आहे, फास्ट मुव्हिंग ग्रॅज्युएट आहे. गुड्स ग्रॅज्युएट मी बनवले, तो तुमच्याकडे राहणार नाही. म्हणजे तुम्हाला डिसिप्लिन आता असतं ना, फर्स्ट अँड सेकंड इयरला डिसिप्लिन मध्ये मुलगाला ठेवला की 4 वर्ष मी डिसिप्लिन करतो. आता दरवर्षी वेगवेगळी मुलं येऊ शकतात. हे एक मोठं चॅलेंज प्रत्येक कॉलेजच्या समोर आहे, कारण तो स्टुडंट तुमचा 4 वर्ष एकच स्टुडंट असेल याची पण गॅरंटी थोडी कमी आहे. तर पुढचं आहे की फी बद्दल वगैरे. फी सुद्धा तुम्हालाच ठेवायची आहे. आता तुम्हीच आहात, गायडन्स नक्कीच असतील, पण फी तुम्हाला आधीमध्ये इन्क्रीज करता येणार नाहीये. एकदा 1 वर्ष ठरली की ती 4 वर्ष तरी ती फी राहील, अशी काहीतरी सोय पुढे होईल. तर ह्या सगळ्या गोष्टी मी बोलत नाही, सरांनी पूर्ण हे कौन्सिलचं सांगितलेलं स्ट्रक्चर, त्यांचा रूल सुद्धा सांगितलेला आहे. आपलं एवढंच आहे की आता आपण AICTE आणि PCIच्या अंडर काम करतो, पण ह्या 2 बॉडी त्या लाल अक्षरात लिहिले, नॉट हॅव अ रेग्युलेटरी रोल. इन्स्पेक्शन PCIचं होणार नाहीये, AICTEचं होणार नाहीये. इन्स्पेक्शन होणार त्या नॅक्स, जी आपली नॅशनल कौन्सिल आहे ती येणार आणि ॲक्रेडिटेशन करणार त्यांचं, आणि रेग्युलेटरी बॉडी वेगळी आहे. तर ह्या बॉडींचं काय काम PCIचं, तर त्या फक्त सिलेबस, प्रोफेशन कसं असावं, सिलेबस कसा असावा हे ते सांगू शकतात. एवढाच आपल्या पुढच्या बॉडींचं काम राहणार आहे. पण नक्कीच शेवटी फार्मसीचेच लोक सिलेबस बनवणार आहेत, त्यामुळे ह्या लोकांना तेवढंच महत्व आहे की ते जे सांगतील तेच पुढे जाणार आहे. तर पुढे सरांनी सांगितलं बोर्ड ऑफ गव्हर्नन्स असतील, IPD बनवावी लागेल, म्हणून त्या कॉलेजला एक्सपर्ट लागतील. बरेच एक्सपर्ट लोकांना आता संधी मिळेल अनेक ठिकाणी डायरेक्टर बनायची, ही एक चांगली गोष्ट आहे. तर हे सर्व होणार आहे आणि नक्कीच चांगली गोष्ट आहे. 20 म्हणजे 2 दशक, 2021 ते 2030 आणि 2030 ते 2040, एवढं 2 म्हणजे 20 वर्ष आपल्याला सुधारायला पूर्ण दिलेली आहेत. 1930 पर्यंत आपलं स्ट्रक्चर ओके असावं आणि 31 पासून 40 पर्यंत आपलं सर्व वर्किंग असावं. आणि हे जर व्हायचं असेल तर आजपासून आपण तयार व्हायला पाहिजे. एवढंच मला सांगायचं होतं. तर बाजूच्या प्राचार्यांशी चांगलं बोलायला लागेल. BA BComचा प्राध्यापक माझ्याकडे येतो का बघावं लागेल. शक्य असेल तर आत्ताच मला रिसर्च चालू करावा लागेल. तर मला माझं एक्सपान्शन करायचं आहे, कारण मला आता मल्टीडिसिप्लिनरी व्हायचं आहे. आता मला मी सुटिकचा आणि केमिस्ट्रीचा म्हणायचं नाहीये. मला पहिलं म्हणायचं मी फार्मसीचा आहे आणि दुसरं कदाचित माझं आता ह्या B.Pharm वगैरे शब्द जातील. BS फार्मसी, BS इंजिनिअरिंग अशी डिग्री येतील अमेरिकेसारख्या. आणि हीच गोष्ट आहे. आणि धन्यवाद. 6% GDP आहे. नक्कीच ग्रँट चांगले मिळतील असं मला वाटतं. बाकी बघू पुढं काय होतं. धन्यवाद. थँक्यू.
धन्यवाद सर. खरंच राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा धोरणामध्ये त्याच्या स्टेजेस आहेत 4+3+4. खरंच आपण मातृभाषेतनं जायला पाहिजे. तो आपण राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा धोरणाच्या इनिशियल लेवलला आहेत. मी इंडियन फार्मास्युटिकल असोसिएशन सगळ्या डेलिगेट्सच्या वतीनं मी तुम्हाला धन्यवाद देतो की तुम्ही अतिशय सोप्या भाषेत फार्मसी आणि राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा धोरण यांचं संमिश्र कशा पद्धतीने ते समोर जाईल. तर मी धन्यवाद देतो. आणि now I request all the respected delegates, because all the delegates are from distinguished cities and they are all what you call significant academic leaders. So the session will be open for a question and answer. So I request everyone please unmute because we all are academic teaching fraternity. So no need to write in a chat box. Please unmute and go ahead, and please one request, mention that from whom you would like to know the expert comments. Over to you, delegates, please. I can see Savant sir, Kokre sir, Kuchek sir, a senior academic leader, Dias sir. Those I can see on a windows. I'm taking a name because everybody is equal academic leaders, but I can see the names here.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. S.D. Savant, representing Senior Card Institutes. At the outset, let me first, thank Dr. Gollar for a very nice, lucid presentation of yours accommodated in 1 hour and giving an almost entire picture of the higher education and this in accordance with the NEP. Something what I had in my mind was also struck to you, and therefore I would like to have little more elaborate discussion on these 2-3 points. Number one was the increasing gross enrollment ratio. Currently it is around 25% and expected to be at 50% by 2030. We all are teaching in the classes. We all know, what is the intake capacity and how many seats are being filled, and particularly in unaided colleges, whether engineering or pharmacy or even arts, science, commerce colleges in the remote areas at taluka places. I think we have enough intake capacity as on today. And vis-a-vis lot of seats are remaining vacant, particularly in engineering. And now we are talking about achieving almost double the gross enrollment ratio in higher education. It means the increasing equal number of colleges or increasing equal intake capacity by next, in next 10 years approximately. So do you really feel that we would be able to provide these many students for higher education? And number two, because it has to be made equitable and inclusive, means those who couldn't reach to the higher education, professional education, medical education, we need to take them into the higher education arena. And those who are away from the, this higher education, means they are downtrodden, they are far, away from even the secondary education. So do you feel that really there are enough number of students to take up the higher education? And to make it equitable and inclusive, we need to stay invested a lot. Last two, education policies have always insisted for 6% of GDP, and we have never reached to 3%. Government is not in position to spend more on education, and probably this trend will continue. I feel the success of this entire education policy would depend on how much, the government wish to invest into higher education. Let's take an example of ICERs. Recently, established last 10-12 years, and the undergraduate student of ICER gets 5,000 rupees per month, and that I think by this time must have been increased also, and takes only 1% of the top cream of the entire country. So where the government is investing a lot, where there is an excellent cream of the students, there you get an excellent output. Now, compare the non-aided institutes where the students with the less percentage of marks, somehow they get into the system. They are not in position to fund their education. They are not good enough. So in this context, how we would be able to improve the quality of education, particularly with this NEP? This is my first question. And to support this, we need an excellent teachers, and we cannot have a good teachers unless we attract them with good salary, good compensation package, and respect in the society. Today, in non-aided institutes, teachers have lost the respect. They are not being well paid. Government is not, enough serious about taking care of them. I don't think with this kind of a contrast system, we would be able to really get good. This would be really challenging in years to come. So how you would address some of these issues, because entire success of outcome of this NEP is going to be revolved around these basic issues, and this is very general everywhere across India. Rather, in Pune, in Maharashtra, situation is far good, but then if you think of some other states, I think situation is worst. So how this NEP is going to address these issues, that would be a great challenge. And my request to Dr. Gullar, being member of this task force and being a hardcore teacher, you must need to stress on these points and come out with the what best something can be thought of, and which is actionable, which is feasible. All policies are excellent, but when it comes to the execution, I think there we often fail to execute in toto. So on this, I mean, without talking much now on this, with this background, I would request Dr. Gullar to enlighten us on this issues.
Dr. Sawant, this is really a very insightful observation. Most of us have these apprehensions, and from the day one, I carry this. We are in a catch-22 situation. I'll give you one or two instances, and that to a larger extent will explain the situation. One, I come from, I worked in Tata Institute and JBIMS Management Institutes of, comparatively a better stature. There are students, and just an example, I mean, I'm very sure that happens with pharmaceutical in colleges as well. There are students who prepare for the entrance exam, and if they get these 3 or 4 colleges, they would enroll for it, or else they'll take a 1-year break and they'll prepare for another year. Now, this is one situation, right? When we talk about, there are colleges which have intake capacities, but they're unable to fill their capacities. I mean, their seats remaining vacant. Why are those seats remaining vacant? Not that there are no aspirants to actually take them, but they willfully, purposefully don't want to take them. This is where a very serious situation, which we all are into in terms of all the higher education institutes, be it pharma or be it even arts, commerce, or be it engineering or management. Why it is a catch-22 situation? Because one, the number of students who actually pass the +2 at this point in time, not everybody, even if at this point in time, if everybody enrolls into higher education, still we will not reach 50% because the number itself is very small. As I said in the beginning, that the population of 18 to 35, as against the total population of India, this is how GR is calculated, which is a very wrong method of calculating. We did correct the policy document, we put it, the calculation should be the number of students who are passing the +2, and of that, how many are enrolling for higher education. So if you look at that particular ratio, it runs into somewhere, for Maharashtra, it runs into somewhere 72 or 75%. That means in Maharashtra, we still have around 25% of the students, after having passed their 12th standard, they're not enrolling for higher education. Now, the reasons are several. I mean, there are some obvious and unobvious reasons for it. As I said, one example of a student who's wanting to aspire, wanting to go for MBA, but still choose not to go for MBA if he doesn't get one or two institutions. Those are one category of students. Second, of course, as you rightly said, there is an issue of affordability. There are issues of accessibility. And to take care of this, there is a requirement of heavy investment. And perhaps the Meru is one of the initiatives that the government has taken up. But that is one. These days, we see that there's a huge investment into Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. And most of the UGC came across with this program of vocational courses into the existing colleges. Unfortunately, we are trying to look at the possibility of building up skills. And on the other side, we also are trying to promote such courses which would build up the vocational education or vocational skill sets, but they are not takers for it. I mean, in Pune itself, there are institutions right in the middle of the city. I mean, I can name them: Ferguson, BMCC, Garware, our own institution. The BO courses are not running to its full capacity. I mean, they literally have to make efforts to fulfill them. So, where the situation is going wrong, I mean, somewhere if we narrow it down, it might be not a very kind of empirically based understanding or observation, but whatever that I have, what I feel is the student to a larger extent are unable to have a correlation between what they learn and what they would want to be. So this link is missing. So on purpose, some students are not wanting to get into this course. And on the other side, some students necessarily will have to get into because they don't have that option. And at the end of the day, they will make their own efforts to make themselves more employed. Not that the institutions are not making the effort, they're doing the efforts, but somehow with the constraints of structures, and more importantly, I'm also trying to look at the second, because when you raise the question, you yourself have also answered it partly. The second aspect of the question is also, if I as a faculty member, if I'm not engaged with my own job, how do the institute expects me to be innovative, to be creative, to go out of the curriculum, to address issues which are very contemporary in nature, to make industry license, to have joint projects? Because I'm not very sure that next year I'm going to be there with this institute or not. And then institute or the policymakers will ask us to think long term. To cut it short, sir, right from the day one, when we had this first meeting in Mumbai with Raghunath Mashilkar is our chairperson for the task force, the minister and also the secretary for higher education existed there, even the AICT directors were there, higher education directors were there. I have on record put this particular issue because I speak my own experiences. I have worked in a central government, state government, and a private institute, and I can see a kind of drastic difference in terms of the way the policies are being, or way the practices are being actually valued. So, can we have some forum? And I have put it repeatedly to this thing, and it has gone on the document. I mean, let me put it very clearly. It has gone as a document, as a kind of an, a kind of a guideline, or maybe as a kind of an, I won't say instruction, but it is noted into the policy document that which is submitted to the government. The first draft is submitted on 30th of June, which very categorically says that there needs to be some rationalization brought in. We are not saying that faculty members should get 7th pay commission salaries immediately. but at the same time, they should get a respectable salary. I mean, the salary, I mean, some institutions are still into the 5th pay and 4th pay, and some are marginally into 6th pay. And at the same time, the appointments are very ad hoc. I mean, the institution may have their own reasons. Some institutions are not doing good in terms of because some of them are very completely a revenue model, and some of them are even not revenue model, but still they're unable to suffice to the expenses. And all of this somehow have culminated into faculty as a first casualty. Whenever there is a cost issue to be cut down, it's always the per head cost, and that the faculty cost is cut down. So this is very unfortunate, and still we don't address this very core issue of it. We, in the sense, I, as the capacity, I consider as one of the representative from you. I have put it in black and white onto the committee, onto the task force, which has been submitted. And there was a serious discussion onto it, including Raghunath Mashilkar sir. He put across that it's a serious situation, and he or every member in the panel, there were also some members from Education Institute. I mean, the management members, like maybe from D.Y. Patil or Hiranandani groups and all that, they were there. And they did express their concerns as well in terms of revenue, in terms of the revenue against the cost. But at the same time, there has to be some rationalization policy or a kind of a committee which necessarily discussed long time back. I'm not trying to fancy with this idea that the long time back, there was a kind of a recommendation that all the institution, private aided institution, unaided institution, they'll have to deposit a corpus to the tune of 1 year's salary with the government, and along with the government business, I mean, Department of Higher Education or Department of Technical Education, and along with the salaries that they pay for the aided, this salary which should also be paid. Of course, the institution will keep on communicating in terms on the approval of the institution, the salaries will be released. But this is, again, I don't know how feasible it would be, and at the same time, how it would be monitored. But if there are some suggestions to this tune, I mean, I have put across my way of looking at it. I said that maybe we can, state can come across with his own way commission, rationalize the salaries. I mean, if for instance, if a granting aid professor is getting to the tune of 3 lakhs, okay, fine, 3 lakhs in the quantum of unaided institution, it appears to be little on the higher side. Rationalize it, but whatever is rationalized, then you, I mean, stick to it. And then in that context, because it will defy the entire pay commission, but it is required today, because time and again, every pay commission we have seen that private unaided institutes have not honored it, maybe for reasons valid and invalid, but we need to address at least at some point in time. If we don't address this, I don't think that people, in the sense the stakeholders, most important teacher as a stakeholder, the center of the stakeholder, they will not be engaged, and the policy will see a half-hearted efforts in terms of its implementation. I'm completely with you, Dr. Savan. I have made my attempt, and you can always write to, in case we can have a forum, we can write whatever, if somebody has some kind of unique idea as to this can be one of the interventions to rationalize the pay structures and service conditions in private colleges. I think we have a forum, we can put it right even today as well through Marshall Sir to the government. So
I'll just, sorry. I'll just add one thing to it. You look at the technical education in India, engineering, pharmacy, hotel management, and management, and these all courses. I mean, the engineers, the technocrats, the pharmacists, they all contribute to the nation building. And if you see, approximately 5 to 7% maximum are aided and government institutes, not more than 10%. So 90% of the private sector is contributing to the nation building, and the teachers who are contributing for it are not being well taken care. So I think the time has come with this NEP to restructure the grant in aid status and non-grant in aid kind of a status. The kind of grants the National Research Foundation is going to think of is nothing but amalgamation of all funding agencies put together, and then under one agency funding to all. But this is going to be more a research funding, not these salary grants and other kind of a funding. So here I think the time has come to rationalize the grant in aid kind of a policy. And I personally feel that you being member of this task force, you should seriously take this issue at the state level and wherever it is required at the national level, because this is actually going to bring a good change in transforming the higher education, technical and professional education in country. Otherwise, no matter how best policy is, I don't think it would be implemented. We would only be saying that this is very scenic picture that we see, and we will continue to see the pictures year after years and decade after decades. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just one addition to one of the recommendation that we collectively have put in, recommendation or observation rather. See, most of our institutions, if you look at the trusts that are not-for-profit trusts, we have actually registered for not-for-profit, it's a charitable commission registration. Because as I said, the Custodian Committee has identified the corruption as well as the commercialization is also one of the reasons why the new education policy is trying to address this particular issue of rationalization. So either a trust or an institution should register consciously for profit or not for profit. Because there are institutions which have registered for profit and then operate on a kind of a corporate philosophy basis. And that's one. Second, in days to come, I mean, because the way we look at it and whatever in my personal capacity I observe, I think that's going to happen, sir. A lot of corporates are going to invest heavily into higher education. The kind of what we see today, infrastructure projects which are built on public-private partnership, even education institute would be coming very soon on a public-private partnership. And that would be actually good for all the faculty members, all the entire faculty, because the corporate culture to a larger extent has some policy guidelines. It doesn't operate on an ad hoc basis. So that they may not necessarily adhere to the kind of pay commission recommendation, but they'll have their own policy and they'll adhere to it. And there would be to a larger extent a kind of a certainty, and ad hocism will be taken care of. So that thing is round the corner, I guess. Many corporates have expressed their interest into getting into higher education because they see the kind of potential it has. And with little professionalism, I guess that could create a huge wonders. And this is one or two additions that we have put, and the other we have put into the policy that the public-private partnership should be encouraged in higher education.
True. Well said. Well said. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for this elaborate discussion. We can say that's a really true panel discussion and question answer session. So with this now, I request again the respected delegates, if you have any kind of a query, please unmute and go ahead. So meanwhile, when the other delegates will, I do have one question as a moderator, maybe it is in the mind of everyone. Yes, I am younger than you, but I'm thinking that this is question to the Pawar sir. Sir, after this NEP 2020, will be there a major changes we can see in a current PCI syllabus on all stages level?
Yes, there must be, because we have to make him pass the first year only, one certificate, second diploma, third degree, fourth research. So the major change will be there. There is no alternative. Yes. And at each level, he should be competent. So only APH, inorganic chemist will not be sufficient. Something should be given at the first year also, so that he can earn something. So this is more important. So therefore, major drastic change is possible in the syllabus.
I have one question. Can I ask?
Please, sir, please. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Golar, sir, for a very wonderful explanation in lucid language. Since the NAP discussion is going on at every forum, I have one thing. As a policy, okay, it's look lucrative or something different or thinking out of box. But the kind of flexibility it is going to offer, I am afraid of whether it is going to give a really good technocrats or professionals. You can enter into a pharmacy and going to engineering and come back, and after this and that, whether it will maintain the seriousness toward the education or it will become a casual approach or a fun fair program. If we all see on other side, one way it is appreciable that we should not work in silos. That is what it indicates, that multidisciplinary approach as per the need. You should come together as a team. Wherever I need the help of, say, engineer, then I should take the help of engineer. Being a core pharmacist, if I need the help of biotechnology, it is as per need. But 1 year education of pharmacy, giving this diploma, 2 year these things. Now in 4 years also, why we have gone to PG, why we are going for PhD, why we are going for postdoc, or in medical education, if say we are going for specialization and super specialization, because that indicate that in a particular area focused approach, telescoping is required, then and only then the person become master and can deliver the things. So with respect to this wide flexibility, I feel that it may not, personally I feel that it may not serve the purpose, rather than it will disturb the entire system under the garb of NEP. So I would like to have your opinion, because you are the expert. This is my perception, which may be wrong.
No, doctor. Sorry, I'm interrupting, Dr. Neeraj.
Yes, sir.
I have also same apprehension in my mind, particularly for specialized courses.
Right.
Say, for example, you take an example of MBBS.
Very true.
You know, to be a good doctor, he needs to keep himself invested in terms of time, in terms of efforts.
Very true.
So much into so much. I mean, so much that you have no option but to be, very, very serious about it
and focused.
And at least for say 5.5 years, unless you are focused, you are not get a good knowledge, good skill, and you are not going to be a good doctor. Right. He can be a good, socially himself, herself can groom very well, maybe after that, not before. So this is also going to be a one issue that something what was in my mind, you picked up rightly. And over to you, Dr. Gullar.
Yes, just objective, information. NEP has kept medicine and law out of his preview at this point in time. So medicine will not be a part of this particular restructuring, and they will continue to have their own bodies. So what you rightly expressed the concern, perhaps it's well said and well placed. A doctor, somebody who's done, let's say, for example, a pharmacist wanting to get into second year for MBBS, that will not be possible, because that somehow will not justify the kind of specialization or professionalism the person is in. Having said that, just sharing my experiences, I was at Tübingen University in Germany for 1 year, and of course, I was for economics and management discipline, but I observed that even their medicine student, I had some of the medicine students in my classroom who are taking the course in economics. Now, of course, that's a choice. When we say that, when we are trying to create a flexibility, it's a choice. And for a country like Germany, perhaps, which is in a way kind of a developed, and to a larger extent, people take education for the sake of knowledge. In India or countries like India, we do take education for the sake of knowledge, but more importantly, we do take education for the sake of employment, livelihood, right? So even we create this flexibility and freedom of choice to students, I think it would be largely dictated by the labor market. How the labor market matures. Like, I'll give an example. I came across with an instance in Germany wherein a principal of a college was applying for a GM position in industry. Now, and not just applying, there is a condition, there is an ecosystem where they are taken as well, right? So do we have that kind of maturity into our labor market today? We don't have that, right? Because we still, even industries operate in silos. It's not the education institute operate, but industries equally operate in silos. Even in industry, somebody is working in finance, and if he wants to shift to supply chain, industry may not necessarily, allow that to happen, right? So I guess it is a kind of a collective maturity with the society in general. And when that happens, that will somewhere reciprocate the education. But nevertheless, perhaps the policy thought about creating or opening this particular door, and then gradually going through it. So today it's somebody who's really taking education for the sake of knowledge, and he's not necessarily worried about livelihood. I started, let's say, for example, I started as a pharmacy, and my minor was economics. But second year, I thought that I don't want to have pharmacy, I want to major in economics. And I already have an established business. So I can afford to do that because I really want to pursue my passion without thinking much about livelihood and employability, right? Uh, that can be possible. But for others to do that, I guess the labor market has to mature, and we'll have to wait for that to happen. But the Education Institute starts it with collaborations. I guess somewhere, because it has happened. I mean, when we look at West as well as in Europe, they're also humans. They're also, gone through this particular, phases what we have actually undergoing right now, and they have evolved, right? But sometimes if you don't start it, I guess we'll continue to have those silos, and we'll continue because in management, as Pawar sir rightly said, that within pharmacy you have those verticals. In management, we have those verticals like finance, marketing, systems, IB. And it is very right to observe, Pawar sir, as somebody, let's say, I had a student, I'm just taking 1 minute. I had a student who wanted to do a social entrepreneurship PhD. Now, the student actually couldn't register for 1 year because none of those verticals actually accepted that this belonged to them. They said, this is not our domain. So there is a requirement in terms of a conducive requirement, not just from the labor market, but from within as well, to mature to that level where we actually start thinking on the other aspect as well. I guess it's not an answer, it's just a kind of my personal observation. I guess labor market and people who can afford in the sense in terms of following the passion without making much of it in terms of employability. At least for those students, we are creating open doors. For example, sir, if you look at the young literature that is we are going through these days, I mean, the writers, most of those writers who are writing those fiction or otherwise, they're engineers, they're medical
Yes.
doctors. They have left their jobs, they have left their careers in engineering, and they're full time into
Yes.
this.
Sorry to disturb you, sir. If it is happening, why there is a need of NEP? That's what. If I am interested into that, I will go into that one. I will take it as my hobby. But the moment when you allow that 2 years of education, you will get the diploma again with the base concept. What you said, that employment, the people will come 2 years, they will somehow this thing get a diploma and start employment. Then that employment, if it is going wrong way because of his half knowledge, who is responsible for that? Is it NEP is going to take that responsibility? So definitely it has to work in that way, because here what you said is correct, that 100% we are more toward the employment and other than. If I have, and what example you have given about European countries, because they are affluent countries. Sir, doctors now after practice of 10, I know one of the doctor leading practitioners in Pune, I won't give the name. He is busy in painting and he does the bending courses, but after 10 years of his service, when you earn everything, when your tummy is full, no, then all these things are okay. But otherwise, if it is 1 year and 2 year and getting diploma and starting the business, I think that is going to affect my personal perception, that will adversely affect the entire ecosystem. In a country like India, you have to give a thought to that. Let him give a choice that he can do 1 year of pharmacy, enter into engineering, but that 1 year of knowledge he should not be able to get any certificate and should not be used for an employment. Otherwise, it will be a half knowledge employment which will lead to a disaster.
True.
Which may lead to.
Yeah, Doctor, even when I say labor market maturing, I also meant that different profiles would be created. I mean, there would be, when I say engineer and pharmacy, maybe there is a profile available for such a kind of education qualification. And talking about engineers being a writer, I mean, what those engineers, on paper, they have said that it was more of a social pressure that I had to complete my engineering.
Yes, very true, very true.
I would have started left it long time back and got into a actual literature instead. So, I know the examples are very few, sir.
Yes. True.
But we are creating that flexibility. It is not going to be an imposition. If somebody starts with pharmacy and ends with pharmacy, that's also fine. But it's just creating that opportunity for people who wish to do that at this point in time. And I guess this number will grow as the market will reciprocate. That's the only thing.
Yeah, thank you.
मला ह्याच्यात ऍड करा वाटतं एकदम सध्या अशी गोष्ट आहे की आपण कुठंच टोकाचं घेऊन चालणार नाहीये, कारण फ्रेमवर्क पिक्चर क्लिअर नाहीये.
बरोबर आहे.
मला हे म्हणता येईल की त्या मुलाला नको ते विषय पहिले टाळता येतील, हा विचार करा तुम्ही. मला जर का फॉर्म्युलेशन डिझायनर व्हायचं आहे तर तुमची केमिस्ट्रीचे स्ट्रक्चर का काढत बसू मी, थोडक्यात असं आहे. तर हा एक संधी आहे आपल्याला की मला नको ते विषय कमी करता येतील. आणि असं होणार नाही की पहिल्या वर्षी फार्मसीला घेतलं तर कोर सब्जेक्ट कदाचित आता सर टास्क फोर्स मध्ये आहे, समजा माझे ह्या वर्षीचे कोर सब्जेक्ट 4 आहेत, ते कोर सब्जेक्ट जे फार्मसी 4 असतील तर पुढच्या वर्षी 4 इंजिनिअरिंगचे घेता यायला नाही पाहिजे आणि घेता येऊ नयेत, कारण तो पुढच्या वर्षी काय मूळपासून शिकला ना. मग त्यामुळे पहिल्या वर्षी काय घेतोय त्यातला काहीतरी पार्ट पुढे पुढे जायला पाहिजे, नाहीतर मग ते खूप अवघड होईल. तर हे सगळं डिझाईनचा मॅटर आहे. पण एवढंच नक्की आहे की आपल्याकडे आता तरुण मुलं विद्यार्थी म्हणून असतील असंच नाहीये, आई बाबा पण आपल्याकडे विद्यार्थी असू शकतात.
येस येस.
नीरज सर, फार्मसीमध्ये 1 वर्ष किंवा 2 वर्ष डिप्लोमा करून त्याला प्रोफेसर होता येणार नाही.
नाही त्याला तू पीजी आहे ना तो पूर्ण.
नाही म्हणजे त्याला लिमिटेशन आहे, जॉब प्रॉस्पेक्ट मध्ये त्याला लिमिटेशन येते.
हो ते सगळं डिझाईन होणार ना. डिझाईन होणार.
सर.
हा बोल.
Yes, sir, please.
Yes. Sir, Dr. Gwalar, I have a confusion in my mind that this NEP 2020 covers school education and higher education, including medical and legal. No?
Excluding
medical and legal.
Excluding, but I think Higher Education Commission of India, there only the medical and legal education is excluded, but entire higher education including medical and legal is there under NEP. So just I need the clarification from you because there is a confusion. NEP covers all higher education, but the Higher Education Commission of India established through this NEP covers all higher education excluding legal and medical.
True. Higher Education Commission of India would be an ethics body. But the four verticals that we spoke about regulatory, grant, general counsel, as well as so those 4 verticals will exclude medicine and legal.
Yeah, there.
So they will be a different body which will again function under Higher Education Commission of India.
Okay, new vertical will be there.
Correct. So that would be called as a functional vertical, perhaps. But that's again still in debate because there are some forums wherein some deliberations have happened, wherein they are wanting this medicine as well as legal law to bring into NAP in these 4 verticals. But that's still in a kind of a discussion manner. Perhaps with the pandemic, things have taken a kind of a second priority. Otherwise, most of the things would have been clear by this point in time. For us, let's wait how things proceed here.
Okay.
But there is one line is mentioned there, Kuchekar sir, in the policy that in the medical also that student can take allopathy, homeopathy, Unani together.
Integrative.
That example is given.
Yeah, integrative.
So thank you, sir. Now may I request
सर एक बोलू का सर?
प्लीज सर प्लीज.
आपण समजा एक जर सब्जेक्ट सिलेक्ट केला असेल तर त्याच्याबरोबर तीच इलेक्टिव्ह सब्जेक्ट त्याच्या रिलेटेड जे सब्जेक्ट आहेत ते घ्यायला कंपल्सरी केलं तर होऊन जाईल प्रॉब्लेम सॉल्व्ह, एक सोल्युशन म्हणून.
हो तसंच होईल, तसंच होणार. डायरेक्ट जम्प नाही मारता येणार कधी.
समजा एकदा शूटिंग जर सिलेक्ट केला असेल त्यांनी, त्याच्याबरोबर समजा फिजिकल फार्मसी वगैरे जे त्याच्याबरोबरचे आहेत ते येतील त्याच्यामध्ये. अशा पद्धतीनं चांगलं होईल जो काही त्यांनी कम्प्लीट करण्यासाठी.
Yes, sir. Same is expected in a PCI 6 semester, 7 semester, and 8 semester. If you have a training in a herbal industry, so you have to opt in your domain of a practice school as a herbal, and as a elective you can take herbal. Rightly, sir, Ambar, sir, you are saying that provision may be there in a PCI curriculum. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So with this now almost Patil, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can we conclude?
I think in the this context of discussion, in the designing of the curriculum, there might be a major subjects and the minor subjects. And there may be a percentage, say 80% pharmacy, 20% other subjects, including economics, music. Like this, the structure may come, and there will not be any funfair, as Neeraj said. The students will be focused to do the pharmacy, but along with the pharmacy, he may learn music. For
improved choice-based credit system.
Yes.
Improved choice-based credit system.
Yes. I think so. This will be the major change.
What I think Golar sir is a right person, so we put all our these things so that he will note it down and he will go. Because what I have observed is a very good teacher and very good listener. The way you have explained, sir, it was a fabulous. That's why so many questions have come.
Thank you.
That's why he is within Marathwada.
Thank you, sir. And this discussion is required. I mean,
yes, sir.
I have actually noted points. I have noted down the points because it's my selfish motive. I need to actually bank on those points to make my own
true, sir.
Point of observations in the meeting. That's very good.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So we can say that this is really a fruitful discussion on NEP 2020. So we can say that it is a very qualitative kind of a panel discussion, because still I can say the number of delegates is still stagnant and they are very much hungry to know about NEP. With the permission of all of the panelists, now I would like to request Dr. Chandrakant Kokre sir to please propose a vote of thanks. Over to you, Kokre sir.
Good evening to one and all. On behalf of IPA Pune branch, I would like to thank Professor Devidas Golar sir, member NEP Task Force and Principal Marathwada Mitra Mandal College of Commerce Pune, for highlighting the details in the present education policy and new education policy, structure of the universities, institutes, major reforms in the higher education, and institutional development plans. Thank you very much, sir, for your time and highlighting the future education policy. I also would like to thank Professor A.P. Pawar, sir, convener IPA Pune branch and Principal Pune College of Pharmacy, for highlighting the present education systems implemented to the all colleges and what is the future education systems and what type of the changes required to make today to properly implement new education policy. I am very much thankful to all principals, professors and students who join this online webinar of NEP 2020. I really appreciate efforts taken by Professor Boble sir for organizing this activity as a secretary of the IPA Pune branch. Finally, I would like to thank School of Pharmacy, MIT World Peace University for giving the technical support to organize this event. Thank you one and all, and I declare that this webinar is over, and definitely in the future we're going to organize such webinars on behalf of IPA Pune branch. Thank you very much for the support and attending this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Definitely we'll meet very soon with the new topic. Thank you. So we are ending the meeting. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.